Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2021. My name is Emma Vigeland in for Sam Seder, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Ursula Hackett, author of America's Voucher Politics, How Elites Learned to Hide the State. Meanwhile, Biden has renominated Jerome Powell for another 4-year term as the Fed chair because bipartisanship. Trump had ousted Janet Yellen for this role and appointed Powell, but Biden is taking the bold stance of cementing the bipartisan commitment to corrupt elite bankers. Important work. COVID cases are ticking up again as Thanksgiving nears, with federal medical teams being dispatched to Minnesota hospitals to help out. Michigan is also seeing a surge. Ahmaud Arbery's murder case, his murder, is set to be decided soon, as the defense made closing arguments today, or yesterday, I should say, in which the defense attorney made her case by describing Arbery's toenails as a reason why his death may have been justified. Seriously, so the prosecution will make their final rebuttal today. The New York State Assembly has concluded an eight-month investigation into the allegations of sexual harassment against former Governor Andrew Cuomo and found, quote, overwhelming evidence corroborating the claims. The DOJ will pay $130 million to the Parkland shooting victims after the FBI failed to properly investigate 2 tips about the eventual shooter months before the mass killing. The FBI was probably too busy spying on mosques or Black Lives Matter protesters or something. And lastly, Yemen remains under attack by the Saudi-led coalition, which just launched air raids on the Yemeni capital. This comes as the Biden administration is proposing a $650 million arms sale to Saudi Arabia as we speak. All this and more on today's program. Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen, and Bradley. Bradley did it. He did it. His first solo intro. He is now doing something like 3 jobs right now with Matt out today. So 3 cheers to Bradley. He was able to pull that off seamlessly. Much appreciated. As you can tell, Sam's out today. I was out on Friday and Monday. So we're kind of passing the ball back and forth a little bit here. But I appreciate everybody tuning in, and we have a great show. I had a bit of a whirlwind few days. Friday, I had to travel to a funeral and drive a long way. Drove back Saturday. Sunday, packed up my apartment, moved on Monday, and I threw out my back moving yesterday. So I'm pretty much okay if I don't stand up. So luckily, I don't have to do that. Bradley's, your 4th job is going to be wheeling me across Brooklyn back to my new place, so I can do some more unpacking.
I'll get you groceries. Yeah,
very exciting. You know, you have Matt's special mic here. You can speak into that. Now you are no longer in the box.
Wow.
Wow, look at that. All right, great stuff by Bradley. Again, apologies if, there was a little bit of a delay at the beginning, but we really definitely pulled it off. So some news to get to today. Chris Christie is the gift that keeps on giving, honestly. Chris Christie's going on this book tour, basically, and he's making the rounds all across Fox News and other cable networks. There's a section in his book on disinformation, and he does not go after Fox News, which is clearly strategic. He was pressed by Nicole Wallace on MSNBC, if you'll recall, about why he didn't target Fox News when trying to dispel the Republican Party of QAnon and Pizzagate and things like that, even though that is the Republican Party. So tough news for the former governor of New Jersey. He said he doesn't watch Tucker Carlson's show, but he does mention that he watches Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity. So I guess he just misses just doesn't tune in to the top-rated cable show of all time. He is not of all time, but maybe. He has enormous literacy in Laura Ingraham and Sean Hannity, but Tucker Carlson, just everything about him just flies out of his brain. So when we were talking about Chris Christie and this seemingly endless book tour, we had a debate on the show over whether who was the biggest Trump cuck. Sam made the case for Chris Christie. I tried to make the case for Ted Cruz because that photo of him phone banking for Trump is just so endlessly generous in the gifts that it provides to us after Trump basically called his wife ugly and said his dad killed JFK. But unfortunately for us, Sam's case gets stronger and stronger every day with Chris Christie. Here he is on Laura Ingraham's show, basically kissing Donald Trump's ring while also trying to lay the groundwork for his own probable run in 2024, which is the whole purpose of this book tour.
Trump does decide to run, no one knows what the heck he's going to do, but if he does decide to run and he gets the nomination, you're going to support him, though, right? You're not going to go voting for Biden or supporting Biden or whoever the Democrats nominate, right? I mean,
I answered this question today on the PBS NewsHour. I said, they asked me directly, could you vote for Joe Biden? I said, absolutely not. I didn't vote for him in 2020, and I certainly couldn't vote for him in 2024. And I cannot support someone like Bernie Sanders, people like Elizabeth Warren. Go through the whole list of the people who were standing on that stage in 2020 and assume that any one of them is the nominee. I couldn't vote for that person, no.
Yeah, so what you don't like about Trump is more personality or backward-looking stuff. The policies you liked, correct?
Look, the policies I supported, and Laura,
that
you did. The line of supporting Donald Trump starts behind me. I was the first elected official in America to endorse him in 2016. Prepped him for those debates, prepped him in 2020 for the debates, and stood up for him as the chairman of his opioid commission and the chairman of his transition. But we lost, Laura, and we've got to get back to winning. We see the ramifications of not winning.
Well, absolutely.
They're happening with all this spending, with the crime and everything else. And so what I'm saying to Republicans
is, election. Got to look forward.
We got to stop complaining, and we got to start working to be a contrast to Joe Biden and to stop him in his tracks in 2022. And every minute we spend looking backwards is a minute we're not spending stopping them. I don't want to go through any more years of Democrat control.
All right, Governor Christie, good to see you.
So there was a lot there, right? I mean, he uses the Trump language even. We've got to get back to winning. Maybe when he caught Trump's COVID, allegedly, he caught some of his mannerisms as well, right? I mean, that would make a ton of sense. But he, as I mentioned earlier, he's trying to thread this impossible needle here of wanting to be incredibly deferential to Trump because he knows where his bread is very, very thinly buttered and it's by Donald Trump and the Republican Party. He needs to show deference to Trump. And his ideal scenario is that Trump is not going to run in 2024. And then he's able to say, I was the first in line for Donald Trump. I think he said he was the first elected official. I'm not sure that's actually true because Jeff Sessions may have beat him. That's true. Bradley? Great. Yeah, Jeff Sessions beat him too. But he means he was the first loser to drop out of the presidential race in 2016 in the Republican primary to endorse Donald Trump. And that was surprising. And Chris Christie does have some instincts and was able to see, okay, the base is going in this direction. But his instincts should also tell him that I think Trump's going to try to run again. And there's really no place for you. He's able to cosplay and he's able to do his tough talk and be Trump light in many regards. But his critique of the Republican Party is just fairy dust. There's nothing that he's offering. there's nothing substantial, and there's nothing different that he's offering than Donald Trump, except not being Donald Trump. And so the base is going to be like, well, you're not Donald Trump. It doesn't matter how he tries to toe this line. They're always going to want the real version. Chris Christie's I can't believe it's not butter, and Donald Trump is butter. And the base is just not going to go for whatever he's trying to pull off here. And if Trump doesn't run in 2024, I actually will be surprised at this point, because the ground is laid for him to have a lot of success. And the more I see Chris Christie kind of flounder and attempt to have it both ways here, the more I realize, okay, I don't really know what the Republican Party can offer that's going to excite the base to the degree that Trump does. And that's really all you need. That's really all you need. All right, folks, we are going to take a quick break. Very quick. Gotta be quick, Martha. And then Ursula Hackett will be joining us, author of America's Voucher Politics, How Elites Learned to Hide the State. And with that, I have, under my computer, some exciting announcements today. So Sunset Lake Seder, and the Majority Report are teaming up to turn America's most consumerist holiday into a fundraising opportunity for a great organization. Give directly. We've talked about this on this program before. Majority Report and Sunset Lake Seder for Black Friday are working together with Give Directly. Visit Sunset Lake Seder.com starting November 22nd. All Seder products will be between 30 and 60% off. Orders over $100 will receive a free jar of delicious Seder gummies. The gummies are dangerously good, and they work super well. I took 2, which maybe I shouldn't have done. I found myself being a little bit silly, and then I had a great sleep. A $40 value for free. No promo code needed. Products are already discounted on the website. So, as I mentioned, I love the gummies. I love the tincture that has some melatonin in it. I'm like the kind of person, my mind races at night and I have a little bit of trouble going to sleep because I just keep thinking about things I need to do. Sunset Lake Seder is very helpful in that regard. Sunset Lake Seder will donate 10% of its sales to GiveDirectly.org, an international anti-poverty organization that sends cash directly to choose for people to choose for themselves how to spend the money with dignity that best suits their lives. Majority Report is matching 10% of that donation as well. There's a lot of like paternalism in the way that some people choose to approach charity, and Give Directly does not engage in any of that, which I really appreciate. People know what's best for them. If you're giving money to help people out, just give them the money, and that's what Give Directly does. And Majority Report and Sunset Lake are going to be contributing in that effort. Sunset Lake Seder is a majority employee-owned business that has donated more than $16,000 this year to anti-drug organizations, animal shelters, union strike funds, national conservation, food shelves, and refugee resettlement organizations. Again, visit sunsetlakeseder.com to take advantage of these discounts and help Majority Report raise money for a great organization. The sale ends on December 1st. All right. Do we have Ursula? And here we are. We are joined now by Ursula Hackett. She is the author of America's Voucher Politics, How Elites Learn to Hide the State. Ursula, thank you so much for your time today. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. I'm delighted to join you.
Yes, thank you for being here. Let's just start then with, I guess, the premise of your book, which are vouchers, and the rise in these kinds of programs, even, I mean, exploding post-2010 or post-2011, but we'll get into how the groundwork is laid. Just from a 30,000-foot view, take our viewers through a little bit of what you discussed in your book.
Okay, great. So, I mean, the book actually ranges over more than 100 years of American history and politics. But the really big story, as you say, is the one that has taken place primarily since 2010. And that is this absolute expansion of school voucher, tax credit voucher programs across the states, such that today we have more than half of US states have some form of voucher program in operation. By vouchers, I mean basically those programs that offer a sum of public money for parents to spend on private education for their kids in whatever form that is, whether that's a tax credit scholarship or an education savings account or a regular voucher program. So yeah, the big story I'm trying to tell in the book is what's going on here. I mean, why have we seen such a rapid, explosive growth in the number of these programs across the country when these programs face such formidable legal obstacles? You know, they face so many legal challenges in court.
Well, maybe part of it too is the courts are super conservative. I mean, part of I think what, and we can talk about how these fall on along political lines, but I mean, part of I think what a lot of conservatives in America are trying is just, well, I mean, the courts are mostly on our side. If it goes to the Supreme Court, they're probably going to side with us, specifically if we're talking about religious schools, which we'll get into. I mean, there's really no downside for conservatives to try some of these things. And we're seeing this with abortion, for example, the egregious Texas law. Just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, essentially.
Mm-hmm. So it's funny you should mention that. I mean, maybe we can get into this in a moment. I've just been writing a paper on precisely the issue that you mentioned on abortion and also the policy of gun control. So there's some really, really interesting stuff that's going on at the moment. But I think to come to your question, I mean, yeah, you're right. So there is this sense, I think now, that there is a supportive legal cushion for these programs. But that's not something that happened overnight. What I'm trying to show in the book is that this is a very strategic process that occurred over many, many decades, where primarily conservatives, whether that's in the early days, segregationists, racial conservatives, later on religious conservatives or individualists, you know, seeking to try and insulate their programs from legal challenge and try and build up that level of legal cushion that exists today. So I think it's a very painful process. It's a process of trial and error where they've experienced multiple legal setbacks and political setbacks, but they're learning over time in a very forward-thinking way about how to achieve that success. So especially when they're concerned that maybe there are some arguments are going to be made in court, whether from teacher unions, concerned about questions of public education and educational adequacy and uniformity and things, or whether that's questions about establishment, of course, because so many of these voucher programs allow religious schools to be included, or whether that's questions about equal protection and so on. So there's all sorts of these things that they're concerned about, and they have had all these setbacks. But what I'm showing in the book is they learn how to overcome that and achieve this extraordinary degree of success.
Yes, and what struck me so much about your book too is just how American this conversation is, and how much it envelops so many different existential questions about like American governance. I mean, there's religion, separation of church and state, of course, teachers unions, as you mentioned, and organized labor, and the relationship that the United States has to organized labor is a part of this as well. There are just a variety of different, I mean, I said religion, but also racism too, and systemic racism is integral to this, taxation as well. I guess as somebody who studies American politics and how it moves forward and how it relates to history, I mean, how American is this relative to other conversations and other things that you've studied as well?
I think it is a very American conversation. I think that's right. Now, I think it's that this is a work of American political development. So I think that we have to really understand these stories as taking place within the American constitutional framework, not only the national constitution, of course, but also all of these state constitutions. And I really love getting into the weeds about some of the language that exists in US state constitutions, like no aid provisions or Blaine amendments, which have been used to try and attack voucher programs. They're sort of basically amendments that say that you cannot provide any public aid to denominational institutions. And this is the really live question with the current Supreme Court as well, deciding on their constitutionality and acceptability. So these are really live questions, but I think it's very much an American story, and I frame it as such. But I think that there is a value perhaps in being an outsider. I'm zooming in here from London. I have a lot of American connections, but I think there is something to be said for having that external perspective and being able to kind of think about America as a case comparatively, and to draw back emotionally perhaps from the work. Although, of course, these are really quite absolutely vital and crucial questions, and I did find that hard at times.
Let's then, I guess, historicize or lay the groundwork for maybe we can divide this into 3 sections to start our conversation: pre Brown v. Board, post Brown v. Board, and then post 2010, I guess. Before Brown v. Board of Education, tell us a little bit about the history of public school and school programs, and how conservatives fought back against this concept, which then, allowed for the voucher program in the post-Brown world to begin to take shape.
Okay, so I mean, I think the first thing to say is that amongst the earliest iterations of these voucher programs were the tuition grant programs that were instigated in the US South in the immediate aftermath of Brown v. Board, basically because they're concerned that the public schooling system is desegregating and that they're going to try and evade that ruling by directing public funds to white parents to spend at private segregated academies. So that is amongst the earliest iterations, but there are a couple of voucher programs or voucher-like programs that were in existence even prior to those programs, like in Maine and Vermont, these sort of town tuitioning programs, which don't include religious schools, but which allowed public funds to be used to send kids to private schools. And actually, there's a big case that's coming up in the current US Supreme Court term that relates to Maine's town tuitioning program, Carson versus Mackin. So there's a question there about whether that's going to be come under fire. But really, yeah, so the earliest iterations were the ones in the South. And of course, what happens is there are several stages. So Brown v. Board happens. And of course, the courts are not able to compel the desegregation of the public schooling system immediately. And of course, we know that takes many, many years. But there are a variety of different strategies that different jurisdictions take in opposition to Brown v. Board. I mean, there's some where it's a sort of okay, we're going to just resist. I mean, the Mississippis, the South Carolinas are just sort of saying massive resistance. And it takes a lot. They don't create tuition grant programs in their first wave because they're just resisting full on. Whereas I think in places like Georgia, places like Louisiana, like Virginia, they actually try these things out. It's kind of like a strategic thing, and they keep going back to the drawing board over and over again as they're finding this, they're getting sort of struck down as unconstitutional. So they say, right, well, okay, we'll create these programs. It's going to be, we're not going to mention race. We're going to try and sort of do that one down. We're going to try and maybe create even more complex means of administering those benefits. So instead of just, appropriating the money direct, you might sort of channel it through private financial assistance commissions. And this is absolutely mimicking a lot of what happens in the South in the aftermath of the attacks, the civil rights advances, right? And they're sort of saying, okay, so what can we do with the white primary when that gets struck down? Well, we're going to privatize it, right? We're going to say parties are private organizations, and so you can't, it's harder for you to draw that kind of equal protection claim. And we're going to privatize swimming pools, we're going to privatize recreational facilities in such a way that we can try and evade this desegregation. And the same story plays out in the education sphere, and it reaches a really substantial number. I mean, there are thousands and thousands of these grants being handed out, and the courts are coming back to them again and again. The big problem for the segregationists, of course, is that no matter how often they're able to, some of them go to these incredible lengths, as I say, to create these convoluted means of directing the benefits through these commissions and saying, look, it's not the state involved, okay? It's private. It's the private choice of the parent. It is not the state. And that is the crucial legal distinction they're trying to make. But the courts are saying, well, hang on, the way in which you're talking about these is, we're doing this to keep segregation, and we're going to do it despite the brainwashers and the communists. I mean, they're just saying this out loud. So the courts have no trouble in drawing attention to that disjuncture between the way they're talking about it and the way in which this thing is administered. So what I'm saying in the book is I've got this idea of attenuated governance, right? This idea that there are circumstances in which it is politically expedient to direct your benefits through private organizations, like Louisiana did, for example, with respect to their tuition grants, or through the tax system, through tax expenditures, and and through private individuals. So instead of appropriating the money directly, you give it to the parents, they can spend it on behalf of the child at the school. You've got a more attenuated link between the state on the one hand and the school on the other, the sort of legally suspect end. But that's not the end of the story, because if you're not careful about how you talk about these programs, if you're not strategic in your communications, then the courts are going to be able to smell a rat and are going to see that there is some disjuncture there, and it's going to be harder for it to hold up in court. So these strategies have to marry with one another, and the segregationists are not especially good at doing that.
Well, I mean, it seeps through eventually, right? There's only so many times you can talk about privatization before the real racism comes out, or taxpayer rights. I mean, that's something we've talked about on the show before, how school choice and so much of the conversation even today about that very topic basically kind of relates to like, oh, these are my individual rights. I'm giving money to the state and I should be able to choose where it goes, although that doesn't apply necessarily to programs that are the benefits of them they're fine with, right? I mean, there's an inherent racism in the concept of the taxpayer, because you're implying that you have more rights than other people because you're giving more into the system and the rest of them are takers. And I feel like that's some of the ways that racists hide the ball when talking about topics like this.
I mean, I think it's really interesting. There's some very interesting sort of research that's been done on the sort of racial politics of vouchers, and I've published a great deal about this, and I've been in conversation with many colleagues about it. And I think it is an interesting, complex story, because when you kind of fast forward to the next couple of decades, and you kind of from that period of time where all these segregationist tuition grants get struck down as unconstitutional, flash forward a couple of decades, you kind of got these a few efforts here and there, but nothing really sticks. And then 1990, 1995, you get kind of Cleveland, you get Milwaukee, and they get the first sort of modern voucher schemes, as it were. And a lot of those were actually pushed by African-American state legislators who were concerned that, their kids were being failed by the public schooling system. And it's a very different sort of, and quite interesting conversation where they're saying, Polly Williams, for instance, who was really instrumental in the Wisconsin effort. I mean, she's going, our kids are the ones waiting at these bus stops to be bussed miles and miles and miles. I mean, we're being failed. We want to have options. We want choice, and that can be quite a potent message within the African-American community. But I think that the issue, the story that continues is that as we come into the sort of present day, there is a cooling, I think, of the sort of race-conscious approach to vouchers, and there's a concern that these vouchers are actually being directed in ways that are not benefiting poor inner city kids, people of color, and that actually it's not being directed towards those particular aims. And so there is a concern, I think, that these programs are not operating in precisely the way that some within the Black community thought that they might at one time. And so, for instance, there was an organization, Black Alliance for Educational Options, which existed for a time. It was a civil rights organization that was specifically designed to focus on voucher solutions, but it folded a few years ago now. And it's the overwhelming story really is that the NAACP and other major civil rights organizations are opposed to vouchers on the grounds that they're a red herring. They're not actually able to help the kids that they, in some cases, purport to help.
I mean, I think we're turning in that conversation, but it took a while. I mean, here in New York, I still feel like there's a ways to go in pushing back on vouchers or school choice. Chicago, obviously, it was a huge issue. But I I guess we can turn our conversation back to a little bit more of the mid 20th century in the post Brown era. How much did these voucher advocates or school choice advocates struggle to gain traction? Because it seems to me that while the groundwork was laid, the explosion really only happened, as you say, post 2010, and now there's like this religious framework that they're using in order to push these policies forward. How did the trajectory change in that post 2010 era, and what happened prior to that in order for the explosion to happen?
Okay, so I think that the existence of those segregationist tuition grant vouchers was, an active obstacle to the success of the school choice movement, because it tainted the cause with racism, frankly, and with supporting the white supremacist institutions and being part of that. And so I think for a number of decades after the demise of the segregationist tuition grant vouchers, which were all of them struck down as unconstitutional by 1970. So we don't have any of those tuition grant vouchers in place going into the 70s. And we get this really sort of slow, sluggish growth. I mean, I think that the demand on the part of some parts of the private school community is there. I mean, I think that there is, a concern, for instance, about funding for parochial schools and things, and sort of religious conservatives trying to sort of think about how vouchers might help their cause. Of course, a plurality of private schools in the United States are religious in character, not a majority, but a plurality. But the problem is that they find themselves butting up again and again against legal obstacles, and in particular, of course, the First Amendment, which says that there should be no establishment of religion. And so the big concern here is, if you're providing public money to schools that are religious in character, whether that's parochial schools, Christian schools, other religious schools, then you are violating the separation of church and state. And so there's all these sort of efforts that are made over a number of years by various different advocates. As I say, in Ohio they succeed, in Wisconsin they succeed, but really those are very few examples. And they're butting up against these constraints. I think, again, it's partly because they still haven't worked out what the right strategy is. I think that there is, and most of these programs are kind of direct appropriation. So you give the money to the parent and the parent spends it at the school, but other than that, it's not kind of hiding the role of the state particularly effectively. And so that really does concern us, concern the establishment, invoke these establishment questions. But then I think there's a big change that occurs. I mean, first of all, we get Zelma versus Simmons-Harris, which is the big US Supreme Court precedent that says these vouchers are constitutional because they're directed via the parents and not directly to the religious school. So that is a part of that legal cushioning. But I think the real story is that conservatives hit on the right formula. And that is, they decide that it's better to direct this money not through direct appropriation, but through tax expenditures, through tax credit voucher programs. So you deduct taxation from donations to these organizations called scholarship tuition organizations, which then administer the voucher to the parent to spend on behalf of the child. There's this incredibly convoluted line that separates out the state from the school, the ultimate beneficiary of this funds. And they also develop a whole series of legal arguments that can support that in court. So they use what's called child benefit theory to make the argument in court that it's not a benefit directly to the religious institution, it is a benefit to the child and thus constitutional. So it's the marriage of these things, and it's the ability of those supporters to say, look, hey, this is about private individual choice, and that thus it is constitutionally acceptable in a way that directly providing funding to the religious schools would not be. So that, I think, is part of the story that happens after 2010, because that's when you get this massive expansion in the number of voucher programs, but also specifically tax credit voucher programs. They can say it's not public money. And when I go around, I spend a lot of time. I spent 8 years talking to 100 advocates, union members, school board members, state legislators, members of committees, a cardinal at one point, who was actually pretty instrumental in getting the Illinois tax credit voucher over the line. So that's an interesting point. But anyway, all of these people, and they're saying those who are supporters of this cause are saying, well, hey, don't say vouchers. It's a dirty word. It's a dirty word. We don't use that word. We're very careful about how we communicate in this fight, and it's been really successful.
Yeah. So I guess they found their after decades and decades of trying, it seems like they found at least a sweet spot that they'll be able to exploit for a little while until maybe there's some catching on about, even though they've pivoted to a more an approach that targets religion as opposed to race, because they couldn't really hide their racism early on, right? The tax credit thing, that's what causes this explosion, right? I mean, politicians saw that they could distance themselves from these policies with the tax credit almost being a buffer in between what they were supporting, because there are some degrees of separation at least between X politician and Y policy. Now you have not plausible deniability, but it seems like you basically have a system that seems like it could be neutral on its face that you're supporting, but that really does fund the right-wing politics that you're probably in favor of.
Well, I mean, I think I'm officially agnostic about the legal value of any of these arguments that they're making. I mean, I think that is a job for lawyers to determine what the true constitutional meaning is. And all I simply observe is that people are making these arguments, and that if you look, I have this incredible data set I've collected on judicial responses to these programs over the last 70 years. So you can see how judges and justices, both the Supreme Court, but also lower courts, state courts, appeals courts, are actually how they're adjudicating these disputes. And one thing we know, I mean, this is clearly a very partisan issue. Republican appointed judges and justices are statistically significantly more likely to uphold these things as constitutional than their Democratic appointed counterparts. I mean, anyone could have told you that. But not only is there a story about partisanship here, but even when we control statistically for partisanship, there is an effect of policy design. So how you're choosing to design that policy matters in court. You can see how judges and justices are taking up some of these rationales and starting to and propagating them and using them in different decisions, and that's also driving this as well. So I think it's a marriage of the policy design strategy and also the rhetorical strategy as well. It's very important.
Can you give us a bit of an example of how different approaches are met, or how judges respond to some of these different approaches, and which ones are successful and which ones are not?
Right. So the federal Supreme Court in 2010 heard this big case, Arizona Christian School Tuition Organization versus Wynn, which was a case. It was probably the next big jurisprudential landmark that followed Zelman versus Simmons Harris, and it was pertained in particular to Arizona's tax credit voucher program. So it was looking at the constitutionality of that program, and there was a really strong conservative liberal split, as you can imagine, right? 5-4 at that time, and all the conservatives are in the majority, and they're saying this is constitutional because this is not public money, effectively, because it's a tax expenditure. So we're not collecting the tax on these donations to these organizations, and so that is not public money, and therefore it's constitutional. The minority, the liberals, say, well, hang on a second, targeted tax breaks and direct social spending are simply different means of accomplishing precisely the same objective, to provide a benefit to an organization or to an individual. So I think that's a really stark example of a case where these disputes about tax expenditure analysis come into play, and you can start to see how the conservatives have really won that battle.
Yes. So, I mean, then I guess we can talk about the post-Wynn era. We touched on it a little bit, but in terms of just tracking the promulgation of these kinds of programs, take us through how explosive that growth was.
Okay, so we have like 8 programs, I think, that were in operation in 2000 on the eve of Zelman versus Simmons Harris, or just before. And there are like more than 60 today. So it's a huge expansion in the number of programs. The actual numbers in terms of students, I mean, we're edging up towards 1 million. I think various different estimates about how many students are actually taking advantage of these programs. But I think it's not just about the sheer numbers who have are taking that voucher, but also the wider story about the school systems in which they are embedded. And that's the concern, I think, from teacher unions, where they're saying, under state constitutional law, there is an obligation for the state to provide for a public, adequate, equitable, whatever the language is, different states have different language, a public education, and that this is a violation of that duty. And so, that's the broader context, I think, and then that sort of gives you a sense of just how explosive it's been. I think what we're seeing now is we're seeing new breeds of education savings accounts. Of course, Betsy DeVos, as Education Secretary, was a big fan of education savings accounts. She never actually succeeded in getting the Michigan effort over the line, but certainly there is that sort of push for various different types of voucher program. And I think the thing that really maybe is concerning for liberals in the modern day, and you mentioned at the very beginning, of course, we do have a more conservative ascendance on the High Court, and this ground game that's been laid at the state level, which I always think people should pay even more attention to from Republicans and conservatives.
I'll ask you about that after this.
Oh, yeah. You will? Okay, I'll leave off on that. But I think that the story now needs to turn to questions of free exercise questions. And actually, the story I'm telling in my book is one of conservatives kind of being on the back foot and going, well, what can we do? How can we try to insulate our programs from challenge where we feel like we're maybe not on a secure legal footing? What can we do strategically? I think that the story now is, okay, we've actually won some of these arguments, and maybe it's about the exclusion of religious schools from some of these programs that becomes the new battleground. And that's where liberals maybe need to start thinking in these strategic ways as well, if they're going to retain some of their policy commitments in this new landscape.
Part of it too is just the conservative legal apparatus is just so, and the way that they're able to push conservative judges on courts. I mean, there's nothing equivalent on the left, and that's something that liberals need to reckon with, I think. But when you brought up just how much ground is being gained by conservatives on the state level, that's like a million alarm bells go off for me, because I think you don't get the national attention on those topics and on those stories that they deserve. But this is a clear example of the tangible consequences of those successes by the conservatives. In your research, what did you find in terms of conservative gains on the state level, and how this affected this topic specifically?
Yeah, so the big moment, as I say, 2010 is a really, really big moment. You can see just the number of vouchers just shoots up, but you see that as part of a whole package of conservative policy. This is the shellacking, right? It's Obama's midterms. It's huge surge on the Republican side. It's an effort to get right to work laws passed, for instance. It's an effort to get school choice laws passed, and you get a whole series of conservative policy agenda items that are being sort of advanced in the states. But I think we even see today, that there is still an advantage in terms of the partisan composition of the current state legislatures. You've got, I think it's 61 chambers that are currently controlled by Republicans, 37 by Democrats. So there is a disparity there, and I think that has so many consequences, as we know, for electoral democracy, not only for policy outcomes, but also for redistricting and for the sort of follow the candidates that are going to go on to federal office. The people getting that kind of ground game and allowing people to sort of develop their skills and then go on to the federal level. So there's so many things that are important about the states that I think we need to pay more attention to, and we can still see that Republican advantage in terms of the number of seats that are controlled. And of course, we also need to think about some of these judges and their elected appointees. And so, as I say, I find a very strong Republican partisan effect of the Republican appointed judges and justices who are going on and ruling in a more conservative direction on these issues. So yeah, absolutely, we need to pay much more attention to the state level. And I think there are liberal efforts that are going on right now to try and think more strategically about that. The other thing I should say is that there's all sorts of organizations that are really good at sharing information around the states, particularly on the conservative side. I mean, you see it on the liberal side too, but organizations like ALEC, for instance, but all these foundations, Cato and Heritage, Institute for Justice. I've spoken to some of the members of those organizations, and also speaking to state legislators across the whole country, and seeing from them that they're getting together, they're learning about what works. They're saying, okay, so we're going to meet up, we're going to see what bills work in other places, and see how we can try and overcome some of the obstacles in our own state in order to try and advance the cause.
So you mentioned Betsy DeVos a little bit earlier. I guess we can now, and we've very organically gotten to the more present day here. If I recall correctly, the Trump administration was trying to do a tax credit scholarship fund. I forget if they succeeded. It's all such a blur. They did, right? Yeah. So tell us a little bit about that, because that seems to be like for conservatives who might have been pushing these tax credits and these voucher programs, that's like a we're here moment, because they've nationalized it in a way that probably wasn't as that maybe might have seemed unimaginable to the racists in the post-Brown era, right? Wow, we have this massive victory on the national level. What happened there, and how has that affected this from a national perspective?
Right. So they certainly extended the tax advantaged education sort of what was a college savings account became a K through 12. You could use it for K through 12 expenses as well, and that was a big win for DeVos. I mean, she's been at the vanguard of efforts to try and push for these programs in her home state, certainly. And so when she got the opportunity at the federal level, I think that was a really major moment, certainly for her. I suppose I would just push back a little bit against this idea that this is the big moment for the voucher cause, because actually I mean, it's still the case, although the federal involvement in education it has been increasing steadily, particularly from the 1960s onwards, but it's still very much a state level issue. And I think that a lot of these battles, certainly they ultimately find themselves at the federal Supreme Court sometimes, but a lot of these are resolved at the state level with respect to state constitutions and state policy pressures. So, and DeVos had been conspicuously unsuccessful in her home state of Michigan, trying to get the voucher cause passed, and they had all these ballot initiatives. It was just getting thrown back. And I mean, the level of public support for these programs varies a lot by question wording. So how you word the poll really matters. If you say are you in favor of educational choice, everyone's like, yeah. But if you start talking about vouchers, people are a bit less keen. So I think there's a sort of educational or informational question there as well. And actually, I mean, this is maybe this is slightly off, but just in relation to a point that you made a little bit earlier about kind of information and people being, I mean, so there's a broader sort of scholarship about these privatized modes of policy delivery that focuses on citizens and how individual citizens understand the work that government does for them. And there's a really big and very persuasive, I would say, research that shows that people don't give government credit for what it does, because in part because of the ways in which these convoluted ways in which these programs are delivered. And you saw that classically on healthcare and Obamacare, people sort of saying, get your government hands off my Medicare. And you just think, well, yes, it's a government program, but people might not perceive it as such, because the ways in which these things are delivered is very, very complex, and sometimes it's through private organizations. So you might not see what the government is doing in your everyday life. So there's a whole great, rich set of research on citizen reactions. I'm focusing here on the courts, and the judges are not hoodwinked. I mean, judges, this is a high information environment. I mean, they are not fooled. It's not that people are being fooled about whether the government is involved or not, but what they are being given is persuasive rationales, and that can come from people like DeVos and her colleagues. It can come from the state level. I mean, it can come from all sorts of different places, but they're using those in order to bolster their arguments, in terms of deciding whether these things are constitutional or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, we can kind of return to the beginning. It's a very American concept, like the submerged state is, I mean, that's part of what you write about in your book as well. And I very much blame Democrats in many ways for this, because You mentioned healthcare. In the pandemic, there was this huge fight about whether to temporarily expand Medicare for people who lost their jobs, and Pelosi fought tooth and nail to make sure that that wasn't the case, that it wasn't as straightforward as that, that they extended the benefits through all of these different like convoluted bureaucratic programs in a way that basically just it gifts the Republicans and the conservatives the talking point that government doesn't do anything for you, and you can focus on securing the individual rights of your child, for example, as opposed to making the government's role in these programs front and center and saying, you know, there's a reason that Medicare has maintained and is one of the most popular programs in the country, and Social Security as well. And in the UK, universal public health care there. I mean, you know, conservatives try to chip away at it, but it's not necessarily targeted as like, we're going to eliminate this or privatize that in the same way. When you make the programs more expansive, and maybe public education could learn from this, and you make government front and center, and you make the case that government can make your life better, it's harder to take that stuff away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that I absolutely endorse a lot of what you're saying there. But I think that, and I would add to it, which is to say that, I mean, we talked a lot about race and religion and some of the arguments that are made in court about the constitutionality of these programs. But I would say that the question about public education, the future of public education, is really, really central to these questions. And so there's a sort of argument that's made in some cases successfully by teacher unions that says this is, in providing money for this program, you are dismantling the public schooling system, and you are reducing the amount of money that's available for us to discharge our constitutional obligation to provide for a free, public, accessible education for all children. And so that's where this tax expenditure argument really bites, because people are able to say, well, it's not public money. This is just private individual choice, and that's all we're doing. That's all we're enabling. So yeah, I think that it really is an existential question, I think, for a lot of public school advocates. And the unions are diminished in numbers, and it's more and more difficult, I think, for them to for them to fight back in some of these places. I mean, I met a lot of very passionate individuals who are fighting this in the courts and in state houses around the country. I think that it is more and more difficult, and that part of that, I think, is also because of the close connection there is between the union movement and the Democratic Party, and the ways in which Republicans have sought to, through the agency fees question as well, for instance, to defang the unions, and in order to hobble their partisan opponents as well. So I think that this is sort of all part of that broader thrust. I think it's not something that we can think of in isolation from that broader conversation.
Yeah, and the Republican media project also spent decades demonizing teachers unions specifically. I mean, that was a huge coordinated effort. And you talk about how well coordinated some of these conservative groups are. They're coordinated well with conservative media, and the left does not have an answer for that at the current moment. So I really appreciate your time today. Ursula Hackett, author of America's Voucher Politics, How Elites Learn to Hide the State. Everyone can check out her book. Thank you so much for your time today, Ursula.
Thanks so much. Delighted to be here.
All right, folks, we are going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will be wrapping things up. We are back. We are back. All right, Tucker Carlson and Kyle Rittenhouse, man. So, Kyle Rittenhouse is, other people have made this point, and so I'm not saying anything new here, but he's going to be like a state representative in 5 years. That's my prediction. 10 years, maybe. Tucker Carlson and other Republican conservative figures are trying to make him into some sort of martyr, even though he did not end up being, he was acquitted on all accounts. Tucker Carlson and Fox News had been following Rittenhouse around during his trial, I believe filming some sort of documentary with him. And as a part of that larger propaganda effort, Tucker Carlson sat down with Rittenhouse for a primetime interview on his acquittal. Here is one part of that interview in which Rittenhouse just states how he wished nothing would have ever happened, and the incident where he murdered 2 people would have never happened. I wish that too. I wish that he did not kill those 2 people. Interesting how he takes himself out of the equation there. And he just is so sick of how this topic is being polarized.
This is not the life that you planned, obviously.
No, it is far from the life I planned. This is something that I wish never would have happened, but it did, and we can't change that. But how it's been how polarized it became is absolutely sickening. Yeah. Like, right or left, people using me for a cause that should never have been used as a cause.
So he was just an apolitical actor, man, when he took an AK-47 like gun, or I'm sorry, an AR-15. I really don't know guns, guys. Sorry if I butcher that. Or he took an assault-style rifle and he went to a protest and he killed 2 people and he said he was there to protect property. That was purely apolitical, right? It's everybody else that's politicizing this. Hold, because Rittenhouse chooses to make a political point in like 2 seconds after that.
Do you think you can have that you can live peacefully in this country, unmolested?
I hope so, but I can't read the future. I'm hoping that people go back and understand the facts and be like, watch the trial, watch the prosecutorial misconduct that I believe happened, and realize that I was an innocent 17-year-old who was violently attacked and defended myself.
Because you wanted to clean graffiti and protect a car lot.
And apparently, a lot of people on the left, it's criminal to want to protect your community.
Do you feel like your life's been destroyed by this?
I feel my life has been extremely defamed by it. I don't think I would be able to go out and get a job and not have to deal with harassment. But I'm at a place now to where I have to have people with me because people want to kill me just because I defended myself, and they're too ignorant to look at the facts of what happened.
I'm just okay. So first of all, he then like sneers and talks about the left. Yeah, I don't understand why this is being so politicized, man. I'm just really disgusted, and I will always be disgusted by how the right is going to decide to make this kid into some sort of victim. If he wanted to go clean graffiti, which apparently was one of his hobbies before he decided to go to a protest with a gun and then ended up killing people and severely injuring a third. If he wanted to go clean graffiti, where the hell were his rubber gloves and fucking sponge, right? I mean, did he want to just like obliterate the brick wall with graffiti on it with as many guns or bullets as he possibly could? It's just like the propaganda effort on behalf of Tucker Carlson. You can't make it up. It's so blatant and it's so disgusting. And, you know, look, he was 17. I understand that. And so it's easier to portray him as the victim of this. And I can understand somebody saying, all right, he was 17 years old and he has the ability to be redeemed, and I believe everybody does. But the issue that I'm seeing is that everyone around him and everybody in the conservative press is basically rewarding him for these actions. He's feeling emboldened by this. He completely seems to feel no remorse. He has removed himself and removed his agency from the murders that he committed. I mean, the way he talks about it in this cold, disconnected way, disassociated way, basically speaks to the fact that he feels and has feels very little remorse and has eaten up the bullshit that's been fed to him, that he was the victim of this situation. So, one, on a personal level, this kid is just gonna probably revel in this new fame, and Madison Cawthorn is offering him an internship, and Tucker Carlson's having him on a primetime interview spot. Like, he's actually learned that when, Tucker Carlson says, do you feel that this has destroyed your life? Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? This kid's like a new mascot for the GOP. Has this destroyed his life? As I said, he's going to run for Congress, state legislature, whatever it is. He has a future in the Republican Party. Don Jr. just tweeted out or Instagrammed a Photoshop photo of 2024, his father, putting the Congressional Medal of Freedom on Rittenhouse. Has this destroyed your life? No, everything that Tucker Carlson and Fox News and the Republican Party is doing is ensuring that this kid is set up for success. They are finding him to be a very useful tool so that there are more Kyle Rittenhouses throughout the country. That's what Republicans want. And the fact that they're setting him up as this avatar of conservative aggrievement allows for that. They want to multiply Kyle Rittenhouses. They want to ensure that left-wing protests and agitation is chilled, and that they have a vigilante force that roams the streets and does things like this. The American legal system is like independent of the merits of the Kyle Rittenhouse case, which, I'm not going to comment on because I'm not a lawyer, but I can take a larger view of the way our system is set up and what self-defense laws allow for. And we have open carry laws in a variety of states which incentivize basically murder and getting away with it. We're not cowboys. We're in a civilized society, apparently, or we're supposed to be. And so our legal system has basically set up an incentive structure for more Kyle Rittenhouses. And then pair that with the conservative media apparatus and conservative politicians who are cheering this kid on. Oh man, we're going to see more of this. So just buckle up.
And can I just add one thing?
Yes, Bradley. No longer on the box.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing about this too is, like, I understand that it's hard to parse because, of course, people are like, he's a 17-year-old. He didn't know, like he didn't really know what he was doing or something like that. But at the same time, it's like, if you don't know what you're doing, you have an assault rifle and you put yourself in that position, there's negligence involved. Mm-hmm. So it's like, obviously, like you said, I'm not a lawyer. You're not a lawyer. Like, but at the same time, to have no culpability for that whatsoever. And I do understand where to an extent where people are like, oh, like the left is not like parsing the details of the case. But yeah, the left didn't represent the guy legally and keep him in jail to raise his bail fund, Mm-hmm. It's like there is proportionality here and who's using him more.
Exactly. Again, I'm not commenting on the facts of the case, as we're saying. I'm talking about what the implications of this case mean and what the case says about the larger structural reality of America and how conservatives are currently exploiting it. I mean, we saw this with Zimmerman too. When the kid's gonna sell that gun for like $5 million, right? Totally. Yeah. All right, guys. We are going to head into the fun half, and we will be joined by Nomiki Konst. So, some fun stuff coming up. Check out Left Reckoning. Matt is not with us today. He is off for the Thanksgiving holiday, but of course, check that out. JustCoffee.coop, fair trade tea, coffee, and chocolate. Use the code majority. Get a little bit of a discount on your coffee or your chocolate. And we're going to be taking your calls in the fun half. 646-257-3920. Do we have Nomi, though? So Nomi can talk a little bit about the Nomiki show. There she is. There she is.
Am I?
Well, no.
Here I am. Well, hello.
How? Guys,
wow.
Your lighting might all-time cool lighting today. All time.
Really? It's a moving target. I don't know. Variables don't change, but somehow they end up differing. No, maybe it has to do with the color of my outfit or my hair or certain things I'm not
digging the whole.
in.
I'm digging the whole vibe.
Thank you.
So, what's happening over on the Nomiki show?
Well, hello there, Emma. On this week's The Nomiki Show, we have tonight on Rockfin for TNS Live, we are doing an extended long conversation with the one and only John Nichols. He's going to talk to us about all sorts of things, but we really get, because he's from Wisconsin, we are digging in on the Rittenhouse case and just all of the variables and how the legal system has been an experiment, obviously a very successful experiment of the Koch brothers and other conservative forces that created a scenario right before Rittenhouse getting off. And then later this week, we have an interview with Dr. Manuel Pastor, who talks about Beto's chance and his path to victory with Latinos in Texas and whether or not that's a doable thing this time around.
John Nichols is, one, he's a great writer, but he is just so easy to talk to about these topics.
So easy to talk to. We cut off our conversation 6 times and then we just kept talking and talking. And then when we did actually end the conversation, because it's a pre-tape, guys, sorry to tell you, even though it's live, I just gave it up.
Thanksgiving. Everyone's doing pre-tapes, so.
Exactly. But we ended up ending, and then we talked for another 45 minutes afterwards off.
Brilliant. And he's also maybe the nicest guy in the industry, so everyone should definitely check that out. He's got
so
great.
Nice.
Yes, so
Wisconsin. Nice. Wisconsin people are so sweet when they're not, racists.
Well, and Nichols is not one, so there we go.
Exactly.
We are going to head into the fun half where we will, as we said, I will be taking your calls. Nomi and I will be chatting with you. We'll be doing some clips. 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 8s. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're nothing.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
I think I might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You. Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me...
Hey, shut up! Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We're back. We are back. All right. There we go. Hello, Naomi.
Hi, the ladies are taking over.
We are. This is like a Femme Friday, but on the Majority Report.
If only we had more than one day a week.
I know, exactly. I just took some Advil. I was mentioning I like totally screwed up my back yesterday moving my stuff because I moved to a new apartment. And
congrats.
Thank you. Although, like, I've never seen the market like this in New York City ever. So it's honestly, it's pretty small and not everything I wanted. but honestly, it's just I couldn't. I was looking for 4 weeks maybe for something in price range, and it was I've never ever seen it this ridiculous because the eviction moratorium doesn't expire until the end of the year, and I think a lot of people are staying, and so of course I support the policy, but a lot of predatory behavior happening right now by buildings.
And they also did this thing, like, I don't know if I'm sure it was covered. We covered it back in the day, but when the Senate became Democratic, one of the first sets of laws that they passed, shout out to my Senator, Mike Gianaris, because he was a big part of this, the architect. But when they defeated the IDC, they were able to pass all these, rent control bills and just sweeping legislation. And one was getting rid of brokers' fees. Brokers' fees, unlike other parts of the country, like Los Angeles, for instance, California, where the brokers' fees go to the actual landlord. In New York, they go to the tenants, and it's extremely predatory because they, a lot of places only use brokers. Well, so those were banned, and then the brokers fought it off and they brought it back. And so it's like in this weird little space now, it's like semi-illegal. So you can really, if you want, you can really fight over it because some of them are really, just playing with fire and think that people don't know that these laws have changed. But I just went through this. I mean, I moved about maybe a month and a half ago, and it was horrible. I mean, there were like 4 places in my neighborhood that were available. I thank God I lucked out with the place I got, but it was horrible. And I'm in rent control. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, there's still, the people are still using brokers' fees all the time. And they rely on that kind of knowledge because most people don't realize, okay, now they're on their way out or whatever. But it's absolutely ridiculous. And I'm probably only going to be here a year because it's so small. Like we're gonna make it work. But I'm gonna have to go through this process all over again, so I can't wait. That's what it's like living here in the city.
As I, if you, you're not a real New Yorker until you've had to look for apartments on a shoestring budget when there's no market available. It's like, I don't know, people, it just tests your strength in a lot of ways.
I thought it was okay moving in the fall and not moving in the summer when it's usually really intense. But I'll shut up about this and maybe we can take a call, read some IMs.
I think it's fun conversation. It's like Hunger Games. Like, I can't believe there's no show specific. There's always about like finding the perfect place. And it's like, no, I want to see tenants like getting in fights over apartments. And like, it's like, that's New York, the way that they used to show on Sex and the City when they'd go to those sales, those sample sales, and people would like fight over the racks. That's how it is when you're trying to find an apartment in New York. Like, I hounded them to get this place.
That would be a dark show, right?
It would hit you right there. Triggering.
When Thanksgiving says Bradley's doing 3 jobs, but he is getting 3 salaries? ?
Yes.
And not so much. I couldn't hear you.
For today?
I'm getting mad salary today. And Sam's.
Yeah, right. All of it. Thursday Zoo Crew fan. I like Emma's Trump impression, but I like her Jimmy Dore one even more.
Oh gosh. Wait, can we do something to trigger the I'm kidding. Because we got to make it very clear that they are very uncomfortable with our type.
Oh yes, obviously. I mean, the fact that you and I are on screen together, it's almost too much for them to handle, probably.
A little bit.
Jonathan Armstead, did you see Eli and Peyton Manning interview Condoleezza Rice last night on Monday Night Football? No.
What?
I didn't see that game. I mean, I watched a little on my phone, but my Wi-Fi is getting installed today, so I did not have to witness that game last night.
What?
Yes, they joked around about her taking a job coaching the Cleveland Browns when she was, and what she thought about women coaches in the NFL. Part of not rehabilitating war criminals should include not them getting a venue on a sports show. Yeah.
Why is she in a sports show? I don't understand.
There was a rumor 3 years ago that she was under consideration to be the head coach of the Cleveland Browns.
I'm sorry, what? I don't understand what's happening right now. This is...
Isn't she on the NCAA board or something?
She's a sports fan. She's like a big football fan. But yeah, I mean, she's the NFL's ties with like the military-industrial complex just get even more ridiculous day by day. That's a pretty.
This should be a show. This should be a show. Like, instead of Designated Survivor, it's like, where like the former defense secretaries go to die or secretaries of state go to like retire. Right.
I know, exactly. I mean, maybe next Monday Night Football, Henry Kissinger or on that the golf game between what's his name? The guys that hate each other, what, DeChambeau and Koepka. J-Man Raps. Hey, Emma, was wondering what you thought of female commentators in the NHL or sports particularly. Up here in Canada, basketball in particular and soccer, I feel, is really taking off. We have the second most NBA players by a lot, and it seems hockey might not be as dominant as it once was. NHL has to broaden its appeal. Anyway, be nice to hear different voices for a change. Left is best. Yeah, I mean, it's no secret that even though I love hockey very much, obviously it's probably my second favorite sport after the football. I don't know what that says about me, but it's even more archaic than the NFL, and they seem completely fine with the fan base that they've cultivated, which is often racist white guys, because a lot of the people that play in the NHL are racist white guys. I really wish that they would broaden their appeal, especially with this ESPN deal. Hopefully that changes a little bit. The NBA and even the NFL with female commentators and with female refs are ahead of the game there. But the NBA is always at the forefront.
Emma, did you grow up in Buffalo? Like, your two favorite sports are football and hockey. I feel like you and I lived, like, you should have lived my childhood. And I don't know what your childhood was, but I should have lived your childhood. So,
I mean, I'm from Jersey. I think I fell in love with the Giants when they won, when they went on that Super Bowl run. And then hockey, honestly, I've said this before, like, my boyfriend was really into the Rangers, and that's how, in my high school, and that's how I got into it, which is embarrassing. But now I think I'm...
There was a hockey team was a huge thing in my school. Like, they had an actual hockey ice rink. I'm the worst Buffalonian. Like anybody who's watching from Western New York is like, we do not own her. She is like, I know nothing about sports.
You like way too long to get to ice rink.
Yeah. And it was on my, like, it was dropped off. The bus stop was right in front of the ice rink. And that's where I would get dropped off in the morning. And I had no idea. And anytime they would be like, there was also a snack place. So like after school, people would go and get snacks. I was like, nope, not going. It's cold already outside. Why would I go and do double cold? Like, you guys are crazy. If you had like a Caribbean rink, I would be all about it. Like, what's wrong with you people?
Caribbean. That's just like a sauna. Caribbean.
Pretty much. I'm like, is there a sport for saunas and spas?
No.
I did not have, that was not my childhood. Let's just be very clear, because you know that the man who should be unnamed is going to be like, privileged girl from,
of course,
Buffalo, New York, guys. Buffalo, New York.
Calling.
You've been there. Not possible.
847 number. Who's this? Where you calling from? 847.
Emma, breaking news.
Yeah.
The Bears are going to fire Matt Nagy.
No,
this isn't a whole sports show, guys. I can't keep up with this. They're like, Sam's not here, so we have to do all sports when Nomi's on. What?
Is that Josh?
Exactly
I'll keep it brief with Josh. Is it official?
Well, we have told Matt Nagy that he will be fired after Thanksgiving, at the Thanksgiving game, so he can end his time.
Wait,
there.
Bradley, we need to turn up the board on for calls. Sorry.
Yeah, we got him.
All right, we need a jank style soundboard, ladies and gentlemen. We got him. You there, Josh?
Yeah, I'm there. I can't hear the soundboard, but.
Oh, you can't.
You want?
No,
you
we don't have the soundboard. I'm trying to turn up calls. Maybe just turn up
Okay.
Sam's computer, maybe. All right, we'll figure it out. But I appreciate it, Josh.
We got it.
We got him. But I mean, not good news for me since I own your first round draft pick. All right, bye.
Well, okay. On the Rittenhouse thing, though.
Sure. Quick.
So I think if anyone listened to Tisky Sauer yesterday, they had I think she's a prosecutor on or a lawyer, who said that essentially the strategy taken by the prosecution was deeply flawed in terms of they tried to paint this as like something driven by fame, and that the judge would not allow sort of any evidence to be like the pictures of with him with the Proud Boys, and that like essentially they didn't talk about the fact that this was like a hate crime, and really kind of I hate using the word domestic terrorism because obviously there's a huge connotation when you use that word, but that this was like kind of an act of terrorism. And that it was just a whole way of trying to like prosecute this, and that was like a really bad strategy by them. She knows more about the legal system than I do, but this woman who they had on, that's really fascinating, and I think that also maybe there's a lesson there for like that this was just a really bad strategy taken by them, unfortunately.
100%.
It doesn't shock me that prosecutors don't necessarily have a great blueprint for prosecuting a right winger. I mean, like a right wing domestic terrorist, if we want to use that term a little. Them not having the blueprint for that is not shocking, I guess.
And we can just a teaser. That's something that John Nichols and I go over on our in our extensive interview. That we talked about the case. I mean, everything from the fact that he had a bulletproof vest. He walked in with a bulletproof vest on that was given to him by law enforcement as like a junior, law enforcement, whatever that is. I mean, I think there's another aspect here, and I didn't get to ask John this before, but I mean, I'm curious if there's an avenue, a civil suit, at least against the police department who provided him. I mean, because it was nobody. I mean, there's no way you should be giving a child equipment, armor.
It's like it's like in The Office, Dwight, wanting to be a junior police officer, right? And they're all just fascists in training.
That's all they are. Yeah.
Officers love that shit because they're true believers.
He's a vigilante. I mean, like, let's just be real. He was a vigilante. He went in there you know, he made Taxi Driver look like he was some sort of, you know, noble, community member of the community. He was a vigilante.
Yeah.
All right, Josh. Appreciate the call.
Thanks, Josh.
Later.
Bye.
Bye. All right, let's do some clips, shall we?
Let's do some clips.
Gotta be quick. Gotta do some clips.
Clippity clip.
I'm becoming like that started as Trump, and it's becoming something very different. Not exactly sure what it is. Oh, let's check in with our good friend Steven Crowder, shall we?
Oh boy.
We were talking about, and maybe it was last week we had this debate with you. I forget who was the biggest Trump cuck earlier. We played Chris Christie clip. He's clearly up there, I would say. Even though I still make the case for Ted Cruz. We all know that Crowder is a cuck to Sam. But anyway, he has some takes on slavery. I think that's all I need to say.
Was he wearing suspenders?
Oh, no, always the holster.
Oh, that's the holster. That's the holster. Okay.
I think that this idea that your race is supreme is incredibly rare, but I think that actual racism, meaning that you have not even necessarily that you view them as inferior, but a predetermined negative worldview of someone because of their race, can happen in any group of people. Yeah. And I do think, actually, we're probably at a point where it happens more. You probably have more black people right now because of what they're being fed by the media who have a preconceived, incorrect, negative idea of what white people are than white people maybe have of black people. I don't know. Maybe it's a 50-50 split, but it certainly is something. All groups can be racist. And the left just argues like, but only one can be systemically oppressive. Do you guys know? Maybe you guys can bring this up, the number. Do you guys know how many slaves there were in the North African sort of like Mediterranean slave trade?
I don't.
Do you know how many?
I don't even have a.
It was a million.
What is he talking about?
Slaves, right, people who lived on the Mediterranean coast, they were at risk. You know, you guys know about the history of North Africa, the Moors. People, and by the way, they were kidnapping white people.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, this is not something. Slavery.
Pause it for a second.
Not something that has been racial.
Which white people were they kidnapping? I'm really confused by this reinterpreted history of what.
I'm not sure either. The point is that he's saying that in the history of the entire world, slavery has not always been the enslavement of black people. You're correct, Steven Crowder. That is actually correct. But in the history of the United States, I'm not sure if he's heard of something called the 3/5 compromise. Somebody who's fashions himself as an old school conservative might want to familiarize himself with the original writing of the Constitution, where black people were literally considered 3/5 of a person because, well, it was explicitly racialized in the United States and codified in the Constitution as such, in the way that it was racialized. But let's hear him this beautiful case at the end here.
You know, the Moors, people, and by the way, they were kidnapping white people.
Yeah.
Just to be clear, this is not something. Slavery is not something that has been racially based.
No.
Ever. Now, it was codified into law because most slaves at a certain point in the United States were black, but you can look at other countries where they decided, oh, okay, now we're going to try and ensure that we maintain control over these slaves. And so, therefore, you look at what are the majority of slaves? All right, we determine them by skin color or ethnicity or where they've come from, like the Indian people were enslaved. There are still people enslaved in the world today. Look, slavery is not uniquely American. It was never uniquely American. It still exists outside of the United States of America. Slavery was never racially motivated, to be clear. It happened in large numbers, to the tune of millions. Black people enslaving white people as well. And it's wrong across the board. The United States is singularly unique in, however, recognizing and ending slavery because it was incompatible with the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Okay, I'm sorry. Historian Steven Crowder. The United States was one of the last countries in the colonial world and in the West to end slavery. The Great Britain did it way before the United States did, as did other countries. And I mean, he wants to naturalize the consequences of slavery, basically as a concept, it just happened to be that in the United States we enslaved Black people. It was a consequence of colonialism. We created racism. We created race as it is constructed today, and thus racism, because we chose to naturalize capitalism and slavery under capitalism, and we made it about this section of people presiding over and owning in chattel slavery this kind of. So we made those divisions more natural in order to uphold capitalism as it was structured under, colonialism.
100%. I mean, listen, New York City would not exist if it weren't for the slave trade. I mean, the port of New York was literally where Wall Street exists today. Wall Street exists because that's where the slaves would enter New York from the Caribbean. I mean, this is literally the foundation of this city that we live in. It's built off of the financial system is built off of the backs of slaves who are not compensated. What's so jarring about this to me is how bad our education has been defunded in this country, that we have gotten to a point where somebody can talk about this openly. I mean, we all know that Republicans feel this way, but he's saying this in such a nonchalant way, like there's going to be absolutely no repercussions for what he says. No one's going to try to cancel him, or at least effectively cancel him. He can get away with saying it, and it's affecting people's lives. So in communities across the country now, in Thanksgiving dinners, you're going to talk to people who literally believe this because they're listening to Steven Crowder's history lesson, rather than, I mean, we should have a show, like literally just a spinoff show where, so it gets into his algorithm in some way, where it's just like correcting history with Steven Crowder, and like someone plays him and we just read history books. We just read like Howard Zinn to him.
Well, I mean, that's part of, we probably should have the text in front of us, but I think that's part of what Sam tries to do and what the majority report tries to do. And so, I mean, when you think about the consequences of what he's saying too, as well, it's just a few steps away from, yeah, slavery was wrong, but back then, there's a reason that white people were able to enslave Black people, right? Because it wasn't them. They just dominated them because, they're more dominant, right?
It was a different time, like the way that he's looking at it. Back then, it wasn't their fault. It was just we've evolved as a country, and it's like you don't hold people responsible for their past actions if society's evolved. Yeah. Okay, Steven Crowder. I mean, it is mind-blowing to me that they can say these things openly, and it gets to those, the two contributors of like the classic conservative movement who stepped down from Fox News because they just could not be associated with that level of racism. It's like, I really think that we're going down a very dark path, and there are absolutely no ramifications for this kind of behavior, whether in the conservative movement or with tech companies, or frankly, like the left isn't really taking it on in a harsh enough way. And frankly, there's not much, they're dominating the airwaves. This is horrifying. I think this is a bigger symbol for something that is much, much bigger and yet to come in the election cycle.
Yeah, I mean, this is a part of what they're trying to do with critical race theory, obviously, too, right? I mean, there is a re-education and revisionist history effort on the right that, for a certain portion of the population that wants to amplify it, it's like a drug to them, because it completely removes all critical thinking from critical race theory, but it completely removes all critical thinking and challenging of their worldview. Conservatives that share this kind of content, or that who this appeals to, they want their emotions to be as coddled as possible. They do not want to think hard or critically about any part of America. They want to be on the good team, and they just want to move forward and exist in their cocoon. And that's what someone like Crowder provides them. And in fact, he does more than that too. He also gives them an out to say, it's not you're not the racist one. It's actually the Black people. They're more racist than white people now. I mean, let's not let that part of this clip get lost, right?
I mean, but this is also, the material conditions are right for this, right? We saw this in when the economy was hit hard in 2008, and obviously Trump exploited the fact that material conditions were ripe for a working class, many of whom that used to vote, they voted for for Obama. And, you know, first it was women, first it was like leading, you know, tapping into misogyny, and now it's tapping into racism. Would these voters that voted for Obama now vote for Obama? I don't know. I think that they've been completely brainwashed, and younger ones in particular, into this us versus them. First, it's, you know, the Mexicans. Now it's critical race theory. Like, who's next? Is trans people. I mean, come on, this is, but this is an electoral strategy. This is all this is it. It's about getting people angry enough about something so they can run on it, because the margins were small enough last time that we're probably going to lose a presidency. We're probably going to lose a Senate. We're definitely losing Congress.
Well, yeah. And then the show
what comes next.
Right, exactly. Then we're talking about existential stuff for sure. All right, let's, on that note, let's read some IMs.
At that point, I hope the UK invades. I'll just say that. I've never wanted another country to invade us before, but please do. Somebody, not Boris Johnson, somebody else.
Recolonization.
Yeah. Recolonization.
I, for one, hope Cuba invades. And they.
Oh, yeah.
Nicole from Buffalo says, Nomiki is so brave not to follow football in Buffalo. If people were like me and Nomiki, maybe we could finally abandon the suburban wasteland of Orchard
Park.
and the violence against innocent tables by drunk guys in parking lots. If we could just move the stadium across the street and make students at ECC South Campus go to class in the middle of a 1 p.m. game, right?
This is some deep stuff, deep cuts.
How are you guys? How do you not love the culture around the Bills?
It gets further. Not only that, I don't eat meat, so I don't eat chicken wings. I don't eat beef on whack. I did growing up. I don't eat chicken finger sandwiches from Jim's Steakout. There's a laundry list of things that make me a bad Buffalonian. And I can hear my mom in the other room, because she's at my house right now. She's like the biggest Buffalo fan. She's like, "What's wrong with you? You're not my child."
I mean, look, I even like them, and I'm a Giants fan. I like their culture around that team. It's fun.
I should do like a cultural excursion and take you guys. We could do a live show in Buffalo. I'll just sit there and make fun of Buffalo because I'm from there, and you guys can enjoy it.
Well, I mean, easy to hate the Sabres, at least. Definitely.
Yeah. Dominic. Who was the guy I remember because he was just on TV all the time. The goalie who like messed it up. Everyone thought he was so good.
Right. Exactly.
Satan, or I think that's what it was. Satan? Someone correct me. It was like Satan. That's what I remember because I was like 8.
Hasek. Oh, gotcha. Sorry, I got a little distracted reading these IMs. Kakupi says, Emma, black people were considered 3/5 of a person as a compromise from 0 for the purposes of counting the populations of states. Yeah, I don't know what I said that was contrary to that.
Just addendum.
I appreciate it. Dago Lefty says the slavery Crowder was referring to is the impressment of sailors, forcing them into serving on those ships. It was one of the causes of the Barbary Wars, nowhere near as consequential as chattel slavery. Yeah, but they get an out there, so that's what purpose it serves. Red, white, and blue Maggie says sarcasm. If Crowder is right about this black on white racism, he better watch out for the very real weight and power of black-led institutions ready to move on him for such dangerous words. Fucking idiot. Yeah. Ray says Nomi's pause it for 1 second is spot on today. We don't need Sam anymore. All right, let's take another call. Calling from a 774 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 774.
Hey, what's up? It's Connor from Worcester.
Connor from Worcester. What's up?
You didn't even do the voice, Emma. Come on.
Worcester. I mean, I'm bad
there
at
we go.
I'm pretty bad at the Boston accent. It's just not my forte.
Hey, I think you guys finally passed the Bechdel test on the Majority Report today.
Oh, yeah? How you doing, Connor? What you calling about today?
So the Rittenhouse stuff, looking at the awesome discourse on Facebook between all my right-wing family members and cohorts and stuff, the whole thing really speaks to the kind of American property uber alles stuff that their whole thing is that, you know, oh, he has the right to go out there to defend property and everything, and that's why, you know, you can kind of circumvent the police. You know, the police aren't doing their jobs correctly if they're not protecting property. But like, they can't understand that people are out there protesting the police that are killing people.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's part of our atomization is causing people to kind of value property over other people. I think there's a certain class of white people in this country that I don't know anything about your family members here, but I'd imagine that being a homeowner, maybe they're suburban, maybe they have connections to, I guess, their identity as being a property owner. That's probably their number one priority as a citizenry at this point.
I mean, what was so interesting is, like, this is a guy who's patrolling down the street with a gun, and somehow the cops don't stop him. They seem to know what side he's on. I mean, if anybody else, white, black, didn't matter, they're in support, they're protesting, right? Some did have arms with them, were doing the same thing, they would have come for them. I mean, that was so weird, is that they somehow knew his intent and they let him be as he patrolled down that street as a 17-year-old, knowing that he was like cleaning up property or whatever his excuse was. I mean, the photos that they were allowed to pull out from, you know, that day and from earlier of him cleaning graffiti off the walls, yet they couldn't admit evidence about him being a Proud Boy.
Yeah. Well, Naomi, that was the thing. It reminded me of a different time where I felt like the cops actually handled it appropriately. I don't know if you guys remember during the Vegas shooting, that stupid like influencer guy. I don't know what the hell he is. Dan Bilzerian. He was.
Oh yeah.
Like a video. Do you remember that video of him? He's like running up to the cops. He's like, "Give me a gun," and they're like, "Get the hell out of here! Who are you?" You know, like,
yeah.
He's like, I have 75 models around me and I'm on a yacht. And why can't I be a vigilante? Isn't that what training is all about? It's just like effing models all day and drinking Cristal? No?
Oh my God.
That was like the appropriate reaction to, you know, someone trying to be a vigilante, I feel like.
Yeah.
Don't follow him on Instagram. You're going to like want to kill yourself. It is the most horrifying. I went down a rabbit hole of looking at his Instagram one day when someone told me, these people, like, I'm like, how are these people in the world? And it's very billionaire. I don't even know how he made his money. Like, how did he's a billionaire, but why? I don't know.
All right, Connor, appreciate it. I hope I didn't make many too assumptions about your family there with the property thing. I just wanted to like guess.
No, it's all good. You're pretty spot on.
Okay, all right, I thought so. I wanted a little bit of validation. Right. Thank you. Appreciate
all right,
it,
take
Connor.
care.
Later.
You know, today I was having coffee with a lawmaker in my neighborhood, and somebody walked in for breakfast. Is related to your point. He walks up and he goes, "Hey there, you know, so and so," and he's like, "Oh, hey, it's nice to see you." And and then the guy goes, "You should rot in hell. You know, you're a disgrace to our community." I'm like, "What?" And this is like a really nice guy. It's like, "You're a disgrace to our community." And I'm sitting there waiting for, he's like, "I'm going to get the people, I'm going to give my neighborhood to vote against. We're going to run somebody against you. We're going to get you out of office." And I'm like, whoa, this is a lot before like 8 a.m. And then he's like, "And it's all because my property taxes are going up. You have made it so," and it was all about property. It was like this huge rant about property taxes.
North Dakota Llama says, "This is not me siding with Crowderama, but what he's poorly referring to is the Barbary and the Corsair pirates of North Africa who slave raids on primarily Iberia, aka Spain, but they did other parts of Africa as well as Newfoundland to go to raid. Crowder's a dumbass to compare transatlantic slavery to the pirate slave raids." Yes, exactly. I mean, that's like, that's a conflation of like a pre-17th century or pre-16th century relationship with slavery with, you know, the iteration of like modern day transnational capitalism and
also it's, I mean, if you're going to look at the roots and go back 600 years or 500 years, I think it'd be questionable to even say whether or not they were white. Like I think a lot of folks would say there's
whiteness and blackness is a construct that, as we currently view it, is very, very much influenced by the way that we relate to capitalism in this country and colonialism. So,
can we do a breaking news thing? Sorry, Sam, I'm killing you right now. Ardawan just tweeted out a new logo for the Majority Report. You're tagged in it if you can see it. It's called the Majority Report with Emma and Nomi.
Oh, I
love it.
No, I can't. You're gonna have to send it to me because like my notifications. I just got so much going on there. I can't even find it.
This is the first one to pop up for me. So,
well, I'm just so cool. I got so many people liking my shitty sports tweets, all that stuff. All right. Oh, MIDI Doctors, tell everyone to hit the like button, Emma. Thank you. Hit the like button. Subscribe. Hit the like button. Subscribe.
Hit that. Do it on my channel too, guys. Same time. While you're there, just jump over there, subscribe, like.
Smash the like button. Then go over and subscribe to Nomi's show. Pulsey Viglin writes it. Emma, now that you'll be laid up with a back injury, you should perfect your Tulsi character. You're killing it at that. I appreciate that. I'm able to flip into the low tones of her creepy villain voice pretty easily, I think. All right, let's take another call. Calling from a 973 area code. I think I know where you're calling from.
Where am I calling from?
New Jersey, I would guess.
You're right.
Yeah. Northern New Jersey, probably, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
Come on, dox me. Narrow it down.
Sorry.
Clifton.
This is Rob from New Jersey.
Hey, Rob.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. I'm okay. So I tuned in right as you guys were finishing up talking about Crowder.
Mm-hmm.
And so I watch him pretty, almost every day.
How are you live?
Well, it's like he's the right-wing guy who I can stand to listen to for a prolonged period of time. Like, I can't do that with Ben Shapiro or, other people. They're annoying. And I mean, Crowder's annoying, but in a different way. And I also, he's also kind of a nice little sponge because he's downstream from all these guys and he soaks up all their bullshit.
Okay.
And the stuff you were talking about, where do you see him, how do you place him in the right-wing sphere? Do you see him going far? Because he has a lot of subscribers, but it's not like he's getting 5 million views on every video.
Crowder?
They're not all tuning in. Yeah.
I mean...
So, I don't know how far he can take this. I don't know where he goes. He seems to be getting more extreme in his sort of views and the way he's going.
Well, let me let you go, and then I'll respond to you, just because calls are a little low in volume right now. But I'll answer your question after.
It's actually because we don't like you. I'm not gonna lie.
No.
I don't want to impinge on your Jersey credit.
Just kidding.
Jersey person, I mean, always gonna have my heart. I hung up on him now, but yeah, I actually think Crowder's trying to get demonetized.
Canceled?
I mean, not demonetized, or deplatformed, I should say. I would guess he's gonna keep leaning into the racism really, really hard. I mean, I shouldn't say he's trying to. I'm saying I think he wants to corner the as racist as you can go angle on YouTube, and if they choose to deplatform him, then he gets an I'm canceled angle, and then he can have some sort of subscription base. But that's just my guess, because I think his angle is I'm the most racist guy on YouTube, pretty much, who has that big of a platform. He even more explicitly so than someone like Shapiro or any of those Daily Wire guys. He's probably the most openly racist right-winger, and that's who I would...
Well, also the Daily Wire guys, keep in mind, these are people who work for media companies. And so, it actually does affect their bottom line. If they're off of Facebook or off of YouTube, it's not as easy for them to just, I mean, diversifying is great, but like when you're independent, it's easier to kind of, navigate from spot to spot rather than relying on keeping a studio going, et cetera, et cetera. Speaking of, I have agreed as of 5 minutes ago to go on Dan Bongino's show on Friday. So stay tuned for that one.
That'll be hilarious. Wow. Well, I can't wait for that on Friday.
He's the most popular guy on Facebook. Good to know. Yeah, because he complained he can't get liberals on his show. It's like,
there you go.
Get ready.
There you go. All right, let's do. Oh, this is exactly what I want to play with you. I saved this specifically. You know me. Josh Hawley's on this masculinity kick.
Oh man.
How boys can't be boys anymore and how men can't be men anymore, and the left wants to make sure that men are unable to be themselves, and that he was challenged on that by Axios about how was that policy, and he didn't really have an answer for it. But this is his way to, I think, brand himself ahead of the 2024 primary when he's going to run.
Exactly.
Here he is with his wife, who is silent throughout the entire clip because, of course, in their podcast on the Bible's lessons about boys and how boys need to conduct themselves.
As we've thought through it, the first place we start with what the Word of God says, and the Word of God says is that we're good, and that we're created male and female, and that's good. But it also goes on to say that the Lord has particular roles for us to play, and that that boys as boys are summoned into great adventure of following the Lord. We want our kids to follow God, but there's unique things that the Lord has for them to do with those qualities that are often associated with boys. So with their assertiveness and their adventurousness and their spirit of independence, and those things are things that really can be directed and used for tremendous good. And so as parents, we're trying to think about how can we play our part in helping our boys own those possibilities, and then direct that energy and direct those qualities into something that's really good and really, really.
What?
Let's just talk about the flip side of that, right? If you're a woman and you're assertive, and you're not docile, and you don't do what your man tells you, that's unnatural.
It's unnatural. You're not a good girl.
Right. I mean, I don't know if I've dealt with this my entire life, right? I have internal anxiety about being assertive. I mean, I'm trying to get over it, but it's antithetical to everything I've been taught.
Conditioned, yeah.
Conditioned to try to be accommodating and polite and help everybody out and obsequious and even my mom is a feminist and but it doesn't matter. Like, society has told me that. I remember I felt when I would speak out about politics, I would feel like guys aren't gonna like me. Like I mean, maybe that's a little personal, but that's something I fight over sometimes just in the back of my mind every day, because people like Josh Hawley and conservative minded men like him, they conflate assertiveness with masculinity, and it's actually quite harmful. And of course, I mean, the beyond just the individual psychology of me, but of women in general.
And it's not even, when you do speak out, society punishes you. This happens, by the way, it's not just a right thing. This is not a centrist thing. This is all over the place. It happens on the left. If you are an independent woman and you decide to make decisions on your own about your life, about speaking out, there are bound to be people that are completely threatened by that. And we know folks like this who, even on left, they cannot, it's something so deeply, because it's one thing for a woman to be conditioned to not speak up, not own their presence, be independent. And there are plenty of men on the left, let's just say, that are fine with that. But it's a whole other thing when a man is triggered by that. I want to know what kind of toxic lifestyle. I mean, and this is the brainwashing that happens. He's not so aggressively anti-feminist. He's not so aggressively misogynistic. He just wants men to be independent, free thinkers, and be able to fulfill their lives fully. Well, the problem is that not every man is not toxic. You know what I mean? There is.
The flip side is like, then what is that? If that's the predetermined role for a man, what is the predetermined role for a woman?
Well, that's the subtext here, right? So they're so concerned with a man's position in the world without even addressing the alternative, which is, well, what is a woman's position in the world? And
be sitting there listening to Josh Hawley speak and stare at him with rapt attention.
Yes, because they're talking about God and children, and that's a space that she's allowed to talk about is children and God, and she can cross her legs and she can be a host and look pretty. Yeah, okay, great. I mean, they're allowed to talk about politics as long as they're serving the patriarchy, as long as they're serving capitalism. And bottom line is we have a lot of work to do here. It's not just the right wing. We have to do it on the left. I mean, there are people who don't even, like you're saying that you're conditioned a certain way. There are men who are conditioned and don't understand that they're operating under those principles. They might not think about them, they not believe in them, but they're operating under those principles without even realizing it. It is such a deeply rooted thing in our society. And there's a resurgence now. I mean, this is Alexandra Reed Ross Reed, writes about fascism. And he says one thing that fascism across the board has in common, whether it's fascist hosts or actual fascist rulers or the rise of fascism, is there's an inherent misogyny across the board. And it can overlap with racism, it can overlap with all sorts of other things, but there is a misogyny. And we see that as Ilhan Omar and Rashid Tlaib and AOC, of course, and Nancy Pelosi, and even Hillary Clinton, as much as we have frustrations with her, they receive a level of attacks that just, it's beyond how they look. There are men who want to kill women in power. And that comes from a much more toxic place than this like whitewashing religious thing. It is something so deeply problematic.
On it. He's just trying to capitalize and multiply, right? I mean, he wants to tap into a constituency in the Republican primary that is anxious about this very dynamic that you're talking about, that is anxious about assertiveness. It's so deeply rooted that we don't even necessarily recognize it when it manifests itself. I mean, something like QAnon, and Sam's made this point before on the show, which I never would have even thought about, but how all this Save the Children stuff from the right wing is so deeply rooted in misogyny, because it's, well, when the women are outside the home, what happens to the children? Somebody's going to prey upon them. And you have the blood-sucking Hillary Clinton demon that's going to, sacrifice the babies for the Satanists. And then you can tap into that religious thing. I mean, Holly's trying to do that too. And so there really is a fear at the root of this that I think, it's so widely spread throughout society, but Holly's attempting to tap into this. And I don't know.
At the end of the day, it's I sit here and I say, what is it about people of color? What is it so much about people of color and women that they hate so much before getting to many others? And I really just think it's labor. They just want it all. Like, have you ever met a guy who just like walks in the room and like owns the room and their presence is so big? That is what this is. It's that they just want to have it all. It is greed. Beyond that, it's power and greed. Like, what is so wrong? I don't understand with like women working. I don't get it. You want free labor. That's what you want. You want free labor.
And they want they want their they want to be the kingmakers, basically. Yeah. It's on the micro level in the home, and it's on the macro level with politics.
Listen, I'll tell you a story, personal story. When I ran for office, I received an email from somebody who I knew for a long time on the left, a man. And he has a lot of issues. People have issues with him. He wants to make himself out to be a kingmaker. And he wrote me this threatening email saying, if you continue to run, we're going to come after you. And I will do everything in my power to go after you. It's in writing. I've posted it before. And I started to there were all these like troll accounts who started saying the nastiest things about me. And sure enough, he came after me, and he, and I had to sue this guy, but like, it was so aggressive and it was so sexist and it was so angry, the tone, that if you read this email, you're like, who says that? Who writes an email saying, watch your back, we're coming after you because you've decided on your own to run for office?
Yeah.
What kind of message is that for the progressive? I mean, this is happening everywhere. They're punishing women for being independent. And that's it, is they want kingmakers. They want, okay, you're a woman, we'll only have you if you're our prop and we control you. But if you decide on your own, nope.
Right. Exactly. Guys, I'm seeing that there's some feedback on my mic right now. Just give me a
yeah. Want to play a clip?
We will in 1 second. Sam, just turn him down a little bit. His mic. Sorry, guys, we're going through Sam's audio. Can you hear me okay, Nomi, still?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Sam should be down pretty far. Okay. You guys can hear me okay? Hopefully that helped. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. All right, chat, let me know if that's the case. First, let's just take a call in the meantime. Much better? Good. Calling from a 484 number. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Is that me?
Yes, that's you.
Oh, hello. I'm a first-time caller.
First-time caller. What's your name? Calling from?
I'm calling from Philadelphia, PA. My name is Jarrett.
Jared?
Jarrett with a T, yeah.
Jarrett from Philly. How are you, Jarrett?
Yeah. I'm pretty good. I'm good. So I had one, actually, okay, I had a couple things, but I'm just going to do one.
Okay.
So this is something that, like, is kind of off the wall, but I've always thought about it for a while. So there's been, like, polling about, like, both Democrats and Republicans being in favor of, like, separating from the union and whatnot.
From what?
And I would...
From separating from unions?
No, from the union, like from the U.S.
Oh, from the U.S. Got it.
And I would say, as like a matter of theory, I would be in favor of that because I've like been an organizer for 3 years, and slowly but surely, I don't know if like the political divide will actually ever really come together. I think we're going I think we have two like distinct political cohorts in America that will persist for centuries on end.
Yeah,
I would do that.
You may be right, but let's not forget that Ronald Reagan wasn't too long ago. He won all states but one in the Electoral College. So there is an ability for, and it might trend more right wing. There was a period of time where Bush's approval rating was 90%.
I can bet you, even if we had if we seceded, if all Democratic states seceded, which I don't even know if that's possible. Guess what? I bet you Republicans would pop up and they'd be in power of that union. Because don't forget, the Democratic Party is still extremely conservative, and I mean fundamentally, like.
I guess it's the idea what AOC said, in a normal democracy, Democrats would be a different party, which is I get how progressives can function in the current political system for the next 50 years. But the thing Medicare for all or actual climate policy, I don't see a future for that.
Well, look, I mean, inaction on climate policy is not unique to the United States. And yes, there are different countries that are better than others, but the problem I think is global capitalism, and that's really as durable as a system as it gets. So I hear what you're saying, and as a matter of theory, I'm fine with having that theorizing, but it's not basing reality, right? So we gotta work with the tools that we've got.
And we're also, eliminating and erasing so many different states in which they might be right wing on paper, but internally there are a lot of disenfranchised people who have been completely, whether it's redistricted out of power or have their voting laws, their voter suppression, civil rights violations happening left and right, and I think there's a lot of frustration, obviously, with organizing, but these are the conditions, and this is why we organize. And honestly, if the Democrats had a vibrant party, if they actually did like real organizing and were the party they were like 15 years ago, and that's not a lot, by the way, like they had like a party in every state, you wouldn't have to see some of these districts go completely Republican. I mean, I grew up in a district, it was Kathy Hochul's district in Buffalo. Just a few years ago, it was a Democrat seat, and now it's an R+11 seat. Like, that is because the Democrats just don't exist. They just don't exist up there, the party. And like, when you don't have a party, people aren't, there's a void. And so the Republicans swoop in, gerrymander, they take over these state legislatures, and it becomes harder and harder to organize against that. But at the end of the day, this is why, we don't have a two-party system. I mean, AOC is right in one sense. We don't have a two-party system. We have a one-party system. One party actually exists. The other just deals with presidential elections. And it's like a PAC in my mind. It's a super PAC.
Do you think like it could be different versus other countries because like the power that individual state, like I don't know for sure if there's other countries.
I think the Senate is like an amazingly undemocratic chokehold on our country. I mean, again, like the stat I refer to all the time because it's just so like stark is there's 50 Democratic senators and 50 Republicans right now, and the Democrats represent 40 million more people.
Yep.
And then the filibuster, which is being upheld by all the Republicans right now and a few of the Democrats, like many of the Democrats, honestly, more than are publicly saying so. That's a huge problem. So the part of what we have to do is you chip away at things, and it's really easy to see history as segmented and our time as individually very scary in a way that's disproportionate to other times in history. But there have been other times where we've had to fight back, and we'll continue to do so.
Money in politics. I mean, none of this, obviously, it's easier said than done, but a major distinguishing factor between our country and the rest of the world that has, modern day democracies is we just have an extraordinary amount of money in politics, and their election cycles are very short. Ours are never ending, and they're cable news spectacles. It's a sport. And we are not able to think deeply about issues because the media is part of that process. I mean, we don't have a fairness doctrine. There's so many different things. I mean, we barely have any sort of public funding of media. And so, when you don't have, there's on a corruption, there's like these corruption reports that they do every year. As fairness in media, as reporting, investigative reporting, and journalism is under attack, corruption goes, rises. That's across the board, everywhere on the planet. So we don't have state house reporters, we don't have investigative reporters, we don't have newspapers anymore. We have big media companies buying up other media companies. And simultaneously, the representation on those shows is vapid conversations with people who are part of the process of making money off the system. So it's a little different here than, it's getting worse in other countries, more similar to ours, but still, like, we have so much money in politics that just doesn't exist in the UK, doesn't exist in Europe, which is probably the closest set of elections to our country.
Appreciate the call, Jared. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate the thought exercise.
I know. Every once in a while we have to kind of do that.
All right, let's turn to a kind of a different story because I think it's important to cover. So much there's a lot of consequences to Cold War rhetoric, and I think that for the most part it's been used to uphold capital and uphold empire, and institutions like the CIA have used it to their advantage. Warmongers have used it to their advantage. But sometimes you see the flip side, and it's a very vocal minority on the left, but they are a minority that will, because these nations are in opposition to the United States, basically they'll uphold them as good or aspirational in a variety of ways.
The invention of history, sometimes there's more behind. Yeah.
That's what causes people to herald someone like Bashar al-Assad, and also that's what tankies are in many ways, and right now, what we're seeing coming out of China with this Chinese is quite disturbing. For people who are unaware, this Chinese tennis player, Peng Shuai, am I saying it correctly? Peng Shuai, I apologize. She's mysteriously disappeared from public life, except for these few appearances since she publicly accused a Chinese government official of sexually assaulting her. Now, we can cover this story while also being conscious of, for example, why CNN is covering it and why maybe this feeds into propaganda efforts by both parties right now as the Biden administration irresponsibly ramps up Cold War tensions with China by making this alliance with Australia, selling them submarines, because of course we need a new adversary for innovation and for also competition, which means like more investment and more and more money flowing around. Those are all the perverse incentives, but that doesn't. We're going to go to this clip. That doesn't take away from the fact that this story is deeply disturbing.
The WTA says they simply don't have evidence right now that Peng Shuai is not being silenced, that she is not able to speak freely. They say none of the proof that has been provided by Chinese state media, John, gives them any comfort that she's actually in a position where her interests are being best represented.
So, Will, I want to explain to our viewers what's happening on our screen right now, because underneath your face, they can see a box, which is the actual live feed of this broadcast in China, but it's all color bars. And it went to color bars the minute you started talking. So what's going on here?
Chinese censors, John. I have lost count over the last 8 years here in Asia covering China of how many times CNN's coverage of controversial issues has been censored. It used to go to straight black. Now they've upgraded and they go to color bars. But nonetheless, it is a live, real-time example of the censorship that's happening in the mainland. They scrub Peng Shuai from the internet. They're certainly not talking about this on television and even international networks. They have an army of censors waiting to push that button the minute that we start talking about this story. But it is not making the story go away. The pressure is still mounting on Beijing from the outside because of the efforts of journalists around the world and also diplomats wanting Peng Shuai to be able to speak her truth.
So now, my thing with the tankies, I was thinking about this for a second. If they want to be so supportive of the United States and they want to really actually both sides, if the Biden administration really wants to take on China or Russia for that matter, or if the tankies who think that the American government is not supporting its people and thinks China is so much better, why don't they go after the money that's just being hidden all over this country? I mean, what China has been able to do effectively, and this is not controversial, this is true, whether it's oligarchs or actual land purchases, like in places like Europe, like they bought the port of Piraeus, which is a huge entry point, which is a huge deal because it was a distressed asset of the Greek government. So they bought a port, or the fact that there's real estate all over the city. I don't know what the latest numbers are, but it used to be 1 out of 4 pieces of real estate was being bought and paid for in cash through LLCs, in which it was really hard to trace the money. You see this, the Panama Papers. If they really want to do that, then why don't they combat that? That is literally what's keeping them. It's this dance. It's this hidden dance. Oh, we don't like China, but meanwhile, then why are you facilitating them hiding all this money?
I mean, because that's from the Biden administration's perspective, that is not their actual, aim. They want a new big bad.
Of course.
They want to pivot away from the Middle East, and they want to ramp up this rhetoric with China. It's not just rhetoric. I mean, they are selling nuclear-powered submarines along with other arms to Australia as a part of this alliance with the UK in order to have a presence in that region. The result is going to be China's going to build up more military bases, and this is a nuclear power, and that's why we have to be incredibly delicate about the rhetoric around this, obviously. But with that said, there are obvious human rights abuses that need attention like this, and the censorship is a massive problem, as is, Peng Shuai is missing And the footage that is coming, as was said in that CNN report there, and of course they never contextualize China's human rights abuses with the United States' many human rights abuses, understandably, and understand that is a part of what the function that they serve as, like, you know, since the outset of cable news.
Yeah.
They were basically, I mean, in the Gulf War, that's when something like CNN was able to gain such prominence, because they were essentially, as Americans were sitting down to dinner, they were showing wartime efforts in the Middle East as some sort of like video game. So that's, understand that that's a lot of what the reporting that they do does. But the point is that this is a scary situation with this tennis star, and we should all be deeply concerned about her whereabouts.
Well, and this is like the frustration I have is, it's like, okay, we can have 90% of our shows go into the problem with the U.S. empire, right? 90% historically, whether it's systemic racism, sexism, whatever, tech issues. But simultaneously, we can hold two thoughts in our head at the same time. And that's the definition of intelligence, even though they might conflict with each other, be hard to process. You know, it is not safe to be a reporter in Russia reporting on the truth. It is not safe to be in opposition to Putin in Russia. It is not safe to be a doctor who was sounding the alarm on COVID in China. How many of those doctors have disappeared? People who challenge authority in certain countries, including our own, by the way, are often punished in different ways. You know, Stephen Donziger is put in prison right now in the US.
Right.
But they're not doing to him in the US what they would do to an indigenous leader and have done to indigenous leaders in Ecuador, or what China is doing to I just don't understand how they think they're going to get away with this. There's something about the power structures, whether it's Saudi Arabia, Jamal Khashoggi, or China, where they think they can get away with this. This is like such a form of disconnect from reality. Like, oh, we're just going to put a bunch of videos up of her being totally fine, old videos of her, and we'll just do this for the rest of her life, and no one's going to wonder. The story is going to go away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the arrogance of power, right?
Yeah.
I mean, part of it's. You mentioned all of like those examples, and but it's really not that complicated. Being on the left is about challenging power and power structures. It's not that hard, and it doesn't really matter what flag is flown.
That's right.
And so this is an example of malignant power at work, and that's why this story is important. And it's really that simple.
And let's make it very clear. Sure, anti-communist sentiment exists in this country without a doubt. That's the whole point of this experiment on the left. But let's also be very clear. Putin is not Russia, the USSR.
Neither is China. I mean, like the idea that this is like, it's important to contextualize it, which is what we're doing. But it's also important to point these things out. And it's important to point out a variety of other human rights abuses in China, which against Muslims, we've talked about before, but that's a much longer conversation, obviously.
We should invite some of our to have a nice debate about this.
Wayne Kerr writes in, "We don't like China, but we really like China's money." That's true.
There you go.
And someone like Biden really likes what competition with China creates, which, oh my God, this is the longest I am ever. Honestly, you guys this is wrong. Once again, you're just factually and politically wrong about SALT deduction. No, we're not. Cutting it was an attack on blue states, on public education, and upper middle class blue voters. Anyone who itemized and lives in the suburbs with great public schools is affected. People with 60K income or couples with 100K. That is not the bulk of who is affected by SALT. Ask Mondaire Jones why raising the SALT deduction is one of his highest priorities. What does that? I'm sorry, but that doesn't mean anything to me, because Mondaire Jones is in favor of it. I'm supposed to support it.
And also, he's reflecting his district. I mean, every politicians are complicated, but he does not represent New York City. Let's just be clear.
Yes, Mondaire Jones has people in his district that would be affected by this, and that's why he wants to get elected. So and doesn't want to be primaried, so he has a position on it. And we are talking about this from a national perspective. Giving tax breaks to wealthy earners, which is primarily what raising the SALT cap would do, in blue districts is bad politics, as Bernie Sanders said, and it is bad policy. So, I mean, this incredibly long I am right here by theorists is just not true. It's
almost like NIMBYism, you know? It's like, it's a similar energy of NIMBYism, like, oh, okay, now it's coming into my territory, so I don't want to do that. It's when leftist restaurant owners don't want to raise the minimum wage and that it's going to bankrupt them. Meanwhile, they're not willing to take on real estate, which is the reason why they're, you know, overhead. It's like when your rent is that expensive, you don't take it out on workers. Challenge the real estate industry if you want to do that. Everybody wants to be able to preserve their little fiefdoms and don't want to go after the big boys. And that's what this does. Is like, it's unfortunate, but
Jack, all right, I'm not reading this. It's gross. What is it that men like Josh Hawley, who look the least like their ideal of masculinity, are so quick to talk about masculinity? I know. Have you seen that picture of him kissing his wife? Sorry to be catty about it, but their sex is bad. Dago Lefty. Hey, Emma, now that Joe Rogan is firmly on the right, how long before that this ardent atheist starts preaching the gospel? I don't know. It could be he's making way too much money to be incentivized to do a Dave Rubin turn.
I just want to say, can we pull some clips from like maybe a year ago when I was like, Joe Rogan is part of the right-wing experiment, and Sam was just like, now that Sam's not here, Sam was just like, no, I just think it's a product of the system. No, I think he is part of the right-wing experiment.
Right. I mean, I was probably more in Sam's camp too, and I think I was a bit naive about Joe Rogan, I'll be honest, a few years ago. So
it's the red one. I mean, again, it's the red brown alliance. There's this. They have to find. They're losing demographics, right? Republican Party was fighting against degeneration, and now they've found a new version based in toxic masculinity. Because one thing that's there across the board is toxic masculinity, and so how do we loop them in? And it started with misogyny and bro culture, and then next thing you know, it's
not even real red brown alliance though. It's just like influencer branding of that. Mm-hmm. It's like that's how they want to appeal to like white online men. Josh from Connecticut. Emma, speaking of shitty sports takes, have we discussed the Jack Eichel trade on here yet? I don't know what take it is. Which one of my takes is shitty about that? I mean, the Buffalo Sabres are awful owners that player get the surgery that he wanted, and he's a top 10 player in the NHL, and I wanted him on my team, but they wouldn't trade him to the New York Rangers, and so he's in Vegas now, and I'm depressed about it. Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. I already read this. Leak says Femme Friday on the Majority Report is my new favorite thing. Also, sports ball is weird. Josh from Tucson. Surprise, Crowder. There's still slavery in the United States. What do they do in prisons? That is not. I don't want to belittle slavery by saying that's what we have, but it is certainly an extension and a continuation of that history, obviously.
You know what? I will challenge, if Steven Crowder is watching, I would love for Steven Crowder to do one of those like day in the life of a prisoner situations. Well, I think if he's a real man, real men do that.
Up like a woman, he doesn't really have that interest in field work.
Then maybe Josh Hawley, you know, part of being a good Christian is understanding and empathizing with what's happening. And I think, aren't they for reforming the prison system now? Isn't that so? They should check it out.
Real Ace Attorney. I don't know what's more depressing: the fact that Giants are 3-6. Nope, they're 3-7. Or the fact that their best start through 9 games. That's their best start through 9 games of the past 5 years. Unreal that Gettleman's been given as much runway as he has. It physically pains me. Okay. Ryan Cole. Brazil and Cuba are the only nations that took longer than the U.S. to end slavery. Also, a lot of Confederate traders moved to those nations after they got their white asses kicked. Weed scientists. Our entire legal system is based on property, and black people were explicitly property for roughly 400 years. That's very true. It's very true. Dr. Chow's MD. Also, if he doesn't end up in politics talking about Rittenhouse, or maybe if he does, Rittenhouse's fame will fade and he will put himself in the position to kill other people again to reclaim that right-wing fame. yeah, I mean, I still think he's going to run for Congress, but
he's too young. He's got what?
Eventually.
13 years.
Eventually. Or state house. He can run with, right? For some position. I bet he'll auction that gun too, is one, you know, or one
yeah, what was the guy's name in Florida? Oh my God.
Oh, I mentioned that earlier. Yeah. When he sold all those paintings and stuff. Yeah, he was that's exactly. Oh, and then he ended up, you know, assaulting his girlfriend or whatever.
I was gonna say continuous. Well, wait, sorry. Just one more thing that was not it was not brought up enough during the trial was how he had just gotten out of. He had gone into an institute. She was institutionalized, and had a history of these sorts of behaviors. What?
Yeah.
Yeah. Or prosecution.
Radical Ross says, in what sense is Peng Shuai missing? She has appeared in videos, a video call with the IOC. I mean, this is unbelievable. And just had a public appearance signing tennis balls for kids today. The implication here seems to be she's been detained by the state, but I've seen no evidence.
Oh my God.
And the other demands.
This
is coming. Yeah, I mean,
is parody? Is this a parody right now?
No, it's not. I'm not. I didn't see this tennis thing, so I can't speak to that. But I mean, maybe you can look that up, Bradley. But
well, she's not live tweeting, and here's a challenge: if you really want to prove that she's there, why not put a newspaper up like the old days when you were, being kidnapped? These are like the same people who also think that the moon landing was false.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, guys. Like, look, I tried to give as many caveats about how this is going to be used to serve Cold War propaganda in the United States and how you push back against that while also calling out these human rights abuses. So that's a little, I mean...
You become a stronger advocate of the left if you are able to understand the nuance. It is stronger for your case. I mean, listen, there are multiple friends and family members who've talked to her on a daily basis who said, we cannot get a hold of her. She's MIA. Why would you be like, oh, here's a video of me signing tennis ball? It doesn't make any sense. It's like if I didn't show up one day, but then somebody put out a video of me, walking down the streets, shaking hands with somebody, and yet nobody in my inner circle could get a hold of me.
Yeah, a little odd, right?
A little odd.
White communists, who always has great IMs. Patriarchy is humanity's oldest ideology of categorical oppression. It has existed at least since the Bronze Age, see the Old Testament, certainly before capitalism. Whatever originated the oppression of women, it has embedded globally in everything. It needs to be combated structurally with policies like free daycare, legally with laws like Title IX, but above all, ideologically. Pervasive cultural dogma replicates patriarchy in new generations. Racism is the same. It's more than just a structural problem. 100%.
And when you have more women in power, like we're about to see in the city council, where it's going to be majority female, hopefully there'll be a female speaker at least. The dynamics of how, even if there's a woman who's more conservative, who mimics the patriarchy in some ways, the power, the way that power operates, the flow of power shifts. And so it actually changes the way others, including the men, are able to conduct business because the majority are women and they're in power and they're actually voting and negotiating on different terms and carrying bills different ways. And suddenly you just see the ecosystem shifts, and that's what the matriarchy is. And in places there's a Knossos Crete, I went there this summer, that's they had a matriarchy there. And it was one of the last forms, you asked when it started or ended. It was the last forms of the matriarchy that there's historic evidence of. And it's just really interesting to see how they operated. And it was obviously more communal. They never went to war, famously. Crete never went to war.
Very cool. I want to learn more about that. Let's take one more call, and then we are going to end the show. Wow, I got to decide. All right, calling from an 818 number. I think I know who this is. You are the final call of the day, and I got to tell you to keep it quick, my friend.
Well, it's going to be very quick, Emma. Hi, Emma.
Hi, Dave.
And Bradley, glad you're out of the box. So, quick. I think I know you guys already talked to death about the Kyle thing, but from my kind of observation of it, You guys can tell me, BLM, when they were protesting, did they kill anybody during the months of protest or anything like that? Your knowledge, no, right?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Right. So
facts,
right.
Stubborn things.
After hanging out, well, I should say, I've grown up with a lot of right wingers. The truth is, this is my assumption. Kyle had no fear of being hurt by protesters or killed by protesters, right? As you guys say, if you come with a gun, open carry, you're making a statement. You're out there to provoke, right? And as you said, one of the biggest right-wing fantasies is looking for legal kills.
Yeah.
Basically using the deranged self-defense laws they have up there to try get into confrontations. And that's kind of, if anything, I think Kyle Rittenhouse is like the future of the Republican Party after all the boomers die off, because that's the type of people that are basically right wingers nowadays. They have this trollish mentality.
Yeah.
They like to fight people. Like you see fighting back the smirk when he was saying, I support Black Lives Matter or what have you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that is the thing that makes me worried about it. As you said, you're going to see more people self-defensing people. No, because that is the goal, right? To self-defend. To use this bizarre metric of self-defense where, but what I'm trying to figure out is, do you see it kind of escalating? Because since the police kind of wink, nod at this, right? You see, like, protesters on the left beginning to arm themselves. Not that I would suggest they do that, because the numbers are against us. But to get into some kind of like a gang warfare type of thing where people are just taking shots at each other. Do you see it kind of devolving like that? Because the same issues are going to still remain the same, where it becomes police brutality or oppression or whatnot. In other words, are the right-wingers kind of setting themselves up to making a far more violent society in hopes that even though they think they're going to Rambo their way out of it?
That's very well said.
All right, well, I'm going to hang up, Dave. But yeah, I mean...
I'll take my answer off here.
All right, I appreciate it. Thanks. I mean, look, I thank you for the call. I'm not sure. You said a lot there. Maybe Nomi, you can take it first. But I am not worried about it escalating from the left, because I just don't think the ideology is the same, and I don't think it allows for it. I just think the left and the right are fundamentally different in the way that they perceive violence. But as I mentioned in my segment, I'm very fearful that the right-wing heralding of someone like Rittenhouse and also the lack of consequences, and in fact the positive consequences that he got. He's famous and probably going to make some money, and I'm sure he loved Tucker before this and got to meet his heroes, whatever. I think that's what I'm concerned about, the incentive.
Yeah, the incentive structure and the legal precedent, of course, is really alarming. And, cannot be said enough. We have to say it over and over again. This is setting a legal precedent. This is an experiment that they're going to start using these loopholes. It's uniquely set up for Wisconsin, but, it doesn't mean that they can't use stand your ground in different scenarios in public spaces in different countries. And I'm sure that they're going to do everything they can, because they control the legislatures, to do this. And, it cannot be said enough. If this were a Black man at that protest doing the same exact thing, where would we be? So there is a danger in setting that legal precedent in that if something were to happen, as you say, which is highly, 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 highly unlikely, based on the principles of the left, would there be the same process?
Yep.
Also, really quickly, just to answer Dave's question, one of the people who died in those protests was David McAtee in the Breonna Taylor protests, and he was killed by cops.
Yeah.
So.
Right, exactly. So there you go.
There you go.
All right, we're going to read 5 more IMs, and then we are going to get out of here. Champagne Commie. I recently watched The Wheel of Time, and it really shows society would be much better if the world was run by a matriarchy. I haven't seen it yet. John Idarola was recommending it to me, but,
I haven't seen it either.
John and I differ greatly on what is good television. He still thinks that the final season of Game of Thrones was good television, and thinks I am like out there by claiming that actually the final 3 seasons of Game of Thrones were pretty bad once they got rid of the source material. It's pretty apparent that David Benioff and D.B. Weiss are hacks.
John's kind of an asshole. Let's be real. John Iadarola is the biggest asshole in the industry.
You know, he treats people horribly.
Throws staplers at people, kicks them off air.
You know, I mean, before people take us seriously, I think
the nicest person in the world.
These two John, we were talking about John Nichols maybe being the nicest person in our industry. He might be competing with John Iadarola.
Literally, so sweet, so kind. And Nando too. Sorry, we've done a lot about toxic masculinity. Let's just throw out some shout outs to people like Bradley.
But we should cancel John Iadarola for his Game of Thrones takes, to be honest. That's kind of it's deserving. Los Angeles Bugman. 2 unarmed Black teenagers were shot to death in Seattle by BLM and Antifa supporters because they were mistaken for political opposition. To say that nobody was killed by BLM and Antifa protesters in the wake of the George Floyd incidents is factually incorrect. I literally said, to my knowledge, I did not know those cases. So, okay. I tried to couch it because I don't have all the facts about every protest in front of me.
Emma, don't you know that Antifa has an organized operation in which they want to go out into different communities? And I'd like to know who that caller was, or that IMer was.
Look, correct the record. I don't mean to be defensive about it. Just, I understand. I was trying to be as factual as possible, but I understand. All right, 3 more. Prairie File Kowalski. Last day of the harvest for me today, also covering 6,500 acres or just over 10 square miles. I'm ready for a break. Wow. Left is best. Also, the Bumble suggestion was good, Emma. Got a few dates in the near future. Thank you, Kowalski. I mean, I'm glad I could help out.
I missed that. What was it?
Well, I was saying Kowalski should not. He was like, he was trying to meet someone on Tinder, and I was like, you should expand your app usage, and because Tinder's just not the right. I mean, I don't know. I've been out of the game for a little while, but Tinder I didn't find much success with. Drewish says, it seems to me that people who defended Ghostar's anime are the same people who lost their minds over the Kathy Griffin tweet years ago. Maybe I'm wrong, but aren't those the same thing? It's actually, you're a little wrong because one of them is an elected official and the other one is a comedian. It's not a joke when a comedian does it. Oh, there we go. Thanks, Drewish. Love the Majority Report. Left is best. All right. And the final IM of the day. The week. Because everything's pre-tape going forward.
It's the Majority Report, so it's not even.
Yes, the Majority. That's actually really good. That's really
so good. I love that.
All right, final IM of the day. Wayne Kerr. I know that you. Yeah, I know that one, but it's just that one's funny. So, even if it's disgusting. Rogan has been praised by the right wing whenever he says something slightly conservative and chastised by the left when he challenges the liberal orthodoxy. I don't think it's the figure. I don't think it's too hard, I think you meant to say, to figure out why he drifted right. All right. That's a good point.
He's always that way. He hosted a show called Fear Factor. Come on, guys.
The incentive structure definitely did not help, for sure. But Nomi, thank you so much for keeping up with me today. Bradley. Whoa. See, Bradley, this was his first time working Matt's board here, and he killed it. And sorry if we had like a few just hiccups, but we're all just working it out in the system, and it was awesome. Thanks, Bradley.
Gotta give credit to Matt for his tutelage.
Yes.
And this is not a job, so.
Yeah, there you
credit
go.
to Matt.
Matt, is always chiming in with like the perfect take of all time while he's doing all this other stuff. So.
I mean, he's been doing it for a while. Okay, so
Bradley's getting it down. Yeah, for sure. So. Thank you guys so much. Happy Thanksgiving if you celebrate. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week. We will see you tomorrow with a pre-tape and Friday with a pre-tape, but live on Monday.
Yep. Bye. Check out tonight's TNS Live too.
Yes.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I guess somewhere the choice was made for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive between the 101 and the 5. Do you know how far the detour takes you? Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. The months drifted into years while I shifted